Welcome everyone, and thank you very much for attending this final meeting of the municipal year of the Transport, Regeneration and Climate Policy Committee. It's really pleasing to see so many members of the public in the room today. We like to be an inclusive and welcoming committee for everyone in Sheffield, whether you live here or whether you work here. The meeting today, of course, is open to the public more broadly. There are no items that contain exempt information, and the meeting will be webcast, and the recording will be available for people to watch later through the Council's website. We've received two petitions, 3 remit questions, and no statements from members of the public for today's meeting. As we do at all such meetings, can I please remind colleagues and members of the public, as well as council officers, to turn your mobile phones or other such equipment onto silent mode, so as not to the content of the meeting. There's no fire test that's planned for today, but if there is need for emergency evacuation, then please do the accountable staff from that assembly point is in Tudor Square. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask members of the committee to introduce themselves, and then I'll also ask officers who are already in a seated position to introduce themselves. Throughout the course of today, you'll hear from presentations from different council officers. What I would just ask is that those council officers just introduce themselves at the start on their speaking. So my name is Ben Miskell. I am chair of this policy committee. You can see everyone. Craig, I'll turn to you.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Craig Gamble-Pugh. I'm a member of this committee. I'm a councillor for East Ecclesfield Ward.
I'm Councillor John Wright. I'm also a member of this committee, and I'm councillor for Walkley, Upperthorpe and Netherthorpe.
Good morning, I'm Janet Riddler, and I'm councillor for Stocksbridge and Upper Don.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Councillor Alexi Diamond. I'm the Deputy Chair of this committee and also Councillor representing Gleadless Valley Ward.
Good morning, my name's Ruth Mercer. I'm the Councillor for City Ward and a member of this committee.
Good morning, I'm Councillor Richard Shaw. I'm Councillor for Bishop and Greenhill Ward.
Good morning, I'm Councillor Tim Huggan. I'm Councillor for Crooks and Crossbow Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Ian Horner, Lib Dem spokes on this committee and Councillor for Bayton.
Thank you very much, Ian. I'll just turn to officers who are in a seated position. Will.
Morning, everyone. Will Stewart, Director for Investment, Climate Change and Planning.
Good morning, Robert Parkin, Legal Services.
Good morning, Amanda Clayton, Democratic Services.
Thank you very much, Amanda, very much appreciate it. And of course, we're supported by Alan as well, who does the amazing recording and webcasting as well. Before we do kick off our meeting, colleagues and members of the public, I think it's probably important that we do acknowledge some significant changes since we last met. I know those people who will have seen it in the press, but perhaps who also maybe attended an event earlier in this week, that South Yorkshire's Mayor Oliver Coppard has launched the South Yorkshire's People's Network. This will help us as we are preparing for bus franchising in September 2027. I know that each and every member of this committee has been a long-standing advocate for franchising of our bus network, and will be really pleased to see that it is coming first to Sheffield in September 2027. People can find out more information about the South Yorkshire's People's Network online as well, and it will lead to better integration of both bus, tram and in the future train as well. So, colleagues, let's make a start with the formal items of our meeting today. I'm just going to turn to Amanda for some clarification. Amanda, do we have any apologies for absence?
No, Chair, everybody's present.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Exclusion of the press and public. I don't think, Amanda, that there's any cause for us to do that with any of the items today. There isn't. Colleagues, the next item, item 3, is an opportunity for declarations of interest. Can I ask members, if they do wish to declare an interest, if they could just state the item of the business on the agenda that relates to, and state whether it's a pecuniary or personal interest. Do I see any colleagues who wish to make a declaration of interest? Don't see any colleagues who wish to do that, so therefore we'll move on to the next item. Now, item 4 is an opportunity for us to consider the minutes of our previous meeting. Can I ask colleagues whether you are content with approving as a correct record the meeting of the Transport, Regen and Climate Policy Committee, which happened some time ago on the 28th of January, and that's on page 11 to 22 of your agenda pack. Colleagues, are you content with approving that? I've seen that colleagues are. I don't think anyone is raising their hand to suggest that we have to make any amendments. So therefore, we will approve the minutes as a true and accurate record. Item 5 is a really important part of our agenda. It's an opportunity to receive public questions and petitions. And like we said at the very head of the meeting, we've received a number of those today, which is excellent. There's a maximum of 30 minutes for this item of business, which I imagine will be sufficient for what we're doing today. Now, we've received 2 petitions. I'll just introduce the petitions, and then I'll ask those petitioners to come up to the front down here. So in a short while, we're going to hear from Adele Bellamy about the pedestrian crossing request on Thornbridge Drive at the junction with Hopedale Road. And then we're also going to hear Joe Freegard about a request for pedestrian crossing on Sharrow Vale Road. We've also received 3 remit questions and 2 supplementary questions that we'll also hear in a short while. So, Adele, thank you very much for coming today. Adele, you're more than welcome to come up here and bring anyone else that you would like to support you in reading out your petition. Just for the awareness of colleagues as well, you should have received sight of these petitions, and they're also available on the council's website for people who might be following from home. Adele, it might be a good opportunity, if you were comfortable to do so, to allow yourself and other people who are sat to the left and right of you to introduce themselves. And you just press the button, I think is the one on your right.
Hi, I'm Adele Bellamy, and I'm bringing this petition today.
Hi, I'm Katie Goddard and I'm assisting Adele with the petition today.
And I'm Councillor Karen McGowan. I've been working with these parents.
Please do go ahead. We'd love to hear your petition. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, councillors. As I've said, my name is Katie Goddard and this is Adele Bellamy, and we're here today to present a petition for a school crossing on Thornbridge Drive, S12, outside the Birtley Primary Academy. We've been working with our local councillor, Karen McGowan, as part of the Birtley Academy Focus Group. We've been meeting over the last couple of years to consider what can be done to make it safer for children to walk to school. So we started a petition to get a crossing, as there's been no safe crossing point for the children on Thornbridge Drive. We've collected 168 online and 442 paper, totalling 610 signatures. So our petition, it reads: we, the undersigned, petition the council to provide a pedestrian crossing on Thornbridge Drive at the junction with Hopedale Road. Thornbridge Drive and Thornbridge Road are a bush route. There's 4 educational establishments within a quarter-mile radius, totalling 1,900 young people crossing the road on Thornbridge Drive onto Thornbridge Avenue and Thornbridge Road. This is along with parents, carers, grandparents and educational staff. As well, in addition, there's people living in the local area going about their daily normal lives, businesses and travelling to and from work. We've not had a school crossing warden for over 2 years now, nearly 3. This post has been advertised several times by the council. Luckily, there's not been any fatalities, but lots of near misses, the most recent one in October 2025. Something needs to change before a fatal accident happens, so please take this request seriously.
So we have done many things to try to make the area safe, such as considering closing Thornbridge Avenue at the start and end of school, so people have to walk up. However, with Thornbridge Drive and Thornbridge Road being a bus route, this could cause more issues and buses not getting through. There would also be Thornbridge Close and Place affected by this, and the residents have made it very clear that closing the street is something that they do not want. We also looked at alternative sites for parents to park within a 6-minute walk of the school, but there isn't any suitable. South East Local Area Committee officers have been into school and delivered good and bad parking schemes with pupils. These are our future drivers, and by educating them early, we hope this will help. They produce tickets with a number of staff handing these out to motorists not parking considerately and those parking well. This scheme has gone down very well. One parent told us that her child said to her, "You can't park there, Mum, it's not safe." The pupils have been given certificates at the South East Local Area Committee public meeting, and the school are continuing with this scheme each year. The head teacher sends out messages asking parents to park safely, and the local councillors have put in Billy and Belinda bollards on Thornbridge Drive to help drivers realise there are children crossing, as we've been unable to attract anyone for the role of school crossing warden. However, these are not always visible due to parked cars. As previously mentioned, we haven't had a school crossing warden for 2 years. We've put a banner on the fence outside school advertising the position, and unfortunately, according to the school crossing wardens team, there have been no new candidates for Burley from the round of recruitment, but the post continues to be advertised. We have had many sessions with the councillors, the council's parking enforcement officers and our local PCSO at the school. The school has started the Living Street scheme, and the scheme launched on the 15th of September last year, and is to encourage more children to walk to school. I live very close to the school. Both my children go to Burley, and when my daughter was in year 6, she wanted to walk to school independently, as her brother had, as part of preparing for secondary school, but this did not feel safe without a warden. Due to safety concerns of the crossing, crossings the road, more parents are driving children to school, causing additional risk and parking issues, which could be reduced with a crossing. We've noted that the planning work for 20 mph scheme on Fretchville is due to start in 2026 by transport planning officers, and works are consequently expected to begin in 2027, which is a good move forward. Councillor Karen McCowan has started up a community speed watch group for Burley and did a session on Thornbridge Drive in February 26, and 2 cars were caught going over 50 mph. We are doing everything we can to keep our children safe, and now we feel it's your turn. We would welcome Chair and officers to come out and visit the site at the start or end of the school day, so we can show you the issues that our children are having.
If it's okay, Chair, I just wanted to come in to just say a big thank you to the parents. This isn't something that they're used to doing, but they've had to stand out in the worst February weather that we've ever had to collect signatures, because the council system means that you've got to make an account and everything, and we found that a lot of parents were not wanting to do that. That's why it's low for online, and the rest were stood outside. So just a massive thank you for what you've done. Thanks.
Absolutely. A massive thank you, I guess, on behalf of the committee. Before I respond, I'll just go to Councillor Horner.
Thank you, Chair. As Chair, I just want to support this as Chair of the South East Local Area Committee, and thank you for your kind words about our work with schools and our officers, our excellent officers. It really is important that we deliver schemes like this, and I absolutely support it. And well done for getting those signatures. And you know, I've worked with Karen before, and you know, absolutely, I do support you on this.
Thank you, and you could see from members of the committee just how engaged they were with your presentation, and I guess that's because you're here representing some of the most vulnerable users of streets in our city, something that's really close to all of our hearts, your parents, your people who are advocating for young people to be able to walk to school, to cycle to school and do so safely, and we fundamentally know that if we make our streets much safer, young people and families will feel enabled to do that, and that's what drives each and every one of us. That's what's at the very heart of our transport vision. I guess it's also important to note the support of your local councillors here and the work that's been carried out already to work with the school, and also that vacancy that you've got in terms of the school crossing patrol warden. Right across the city, we know that we have a large number of school crossing patrol wardens, but we also know that we've got a number of vacancies. I know that your Councillor Karen McGowan, has been very busy advertising that locally alongside parents, alongside the school, but we still do need people to apply to that particular role, because it's really, really important and does some amazing work. You obviously quite clearly support our Vision Zero commitment as a city, which is to eliminate all fatalities and serious injuries on Sheffield's roads, and that's what we are committed to doing. I guess it's important to also note that on page 92 of the agenda pack, we are, as a city council, investing 3.81 million into pedestrian crossings right across the city, and that investment is really starting to deliver results, with schemes that are recently in completion or soon to begin. And right across the city, we have got these coming in. So, for example, we've got a new crossing on Dyche Lane near the junction of Batemore Road in Beechief and Grenell. We've got construction starting in May on a crossing on Heavies Road. We've got a new crossing on London Road that's scheduled for later this calendar year, a zebra crossing at Shire Green Lane and Monkton Road that's expected to begin by the summer. We've got approved funding for a crossing at Glossop Road near Brunswick Road, a crossing approved outside Ewlands Academy to improve the safety for pupils, a new crossing at Wordsworth Avenue that serves Cookson Park Playground, and through our local area committees, we're also starting to progress a number of schemes starting early next year, including a crossing on Stanforth Road, which is due in March, improvements on Shelbourne Road and Manchester Road, a new crossing on Howard Road near Fulton Road, a zebra crossing on Shea House Lane, a signal control crossing on Jenkin Road in April, a new zebra crossing on Myrtle Road at the junction of Anns Road, which should start in January. Additional works also be completed at Burley Spa Lane, and crossings are also being delivered through other funding streams, such as schemes near the Outward Academy on Stradbroke Road and at Hollybank Road and Hollybank Avenue. Now, that represents a really significant and sustained investment in safer crossings right across our city. Now, as you can see from that list that I have just read out there, the 2025 to 2026 pedestrian crossing programme is now fully allocated and progressing, which means we're not able to add further schemes to this particular programme year. However, and I think we've heard from members of the committee already, I do want to assure you that this location will be assessed and considered for inclusion in future programmes. We'll also continue to work with you and your local councillors so that assessment does move forward. I think there was an invite there for members of the committee and certainly myself and officers to come out and see it in motion just before school starts and after school. I know that I've been out at many locations with Councillor McGowan already, and I will certainly do that, and will extend that invite to other members of the committee. So whilst I regret that we can't necessarily implement it in this calendar year, it will be something that we will consider and assess in the future. And on behalf of the committee, I want to really thank you for bringing your petition today. We will come out and we will take up that invitation, and we will assess your request as well. And as you can see, there's certainly a desire amongst this committee to make sure that we spend much more and deliver many more crossings in different parts of the city. So thank you for coming today. Thank you. Our next petitioner is Joe Freegard. Joe, if you would like to come to the microphone, I think you might be supported by Ed as well. And Joe, I think, is handing out some pictures as well for members of the committee, which of course is really useful. Thank you so much, Joe. Joe, when you're comfortable to do so, if you could just introduce yourself, and if Ed at the side of you would be happy to introduce himself, so that would be wonderful. Thank you.
My name's Joe Freegard. I'm a resident of Ashford Road in Sharrowvale, and I brought the petition today.
My name's Ed Maltby. I'm Joe's neighbour, and I'm here to support him.
Well, thank you. Whenever you're ready, we'd love to hear about your petition, and thank you for bringing it today.
Okay, thank you. Sharrowvale Road is very busy with traffic and is both difficult and dangerous to cross due to a lack of pedestrian crossings. This is particularly the case for people with children or mobility issues. Aside from one crossing at the western end of this long road, there are no other pedestrian crossings. Sharrowvale Road is a local centre filled with shops, amenities and 2 schools, and is very busy with pedestrians. Crossing the road, even within the main centre of this area, is problematic, especially during rush hour traffic, such as school opening and closing times, and when people start and finish work. The area around the junction between Sharrowvale Road and Hickmott Road is particularly dangerous, as this is a traffic bottleneck. At busy times, pedestrians are unable to look for gaps between traffic due to the sheer number of vehicles, and are forced to cross between idling vehicles that are caught in this bottleneck. Drivers are unable to see pedestrians attempting to cross the road adequately, and are often moving their cars back and forth in an agitated manner in order to try and get through. The matter is exacerbated by the number of vehicles that regularly park on double yellow lines on Sharrowvale Road, which results in pedestrians being forced to peer between parked vehicles and idling vehicles in order to cross the road. On occasions, there will be a traffic jam all the way towards the top of Sharrowvale Road due to the level of congestion, which can take a significant amount of time to clear and is accompanied by angry drivers attempting to manoeuvre their vehicles in a reckless manner. It is especially difficult and dangerous to cross the road at these times. I've personally nearly been run over on a couple of occasions, and I'm aware of other accidents and near accidents due to these issues. The situation is particularly worrying for people with young children who are regularly forced to push prams between parked cars and in front of idling vehicles with agitated drivers in order to cross the road. I am therefore making the case for a second crossing, which I hope you will support. I have submitted a petition to support this campaign, which has been signed by around 400 people so far. The vast majority of residents along Ashford Road and Jarrow Road, and businesses along Sharrowvale Road and Hickmott Road, are supportive of this campaign and have signed. It is suggested that the crossing is positioned somewhere between Stewart Road and Jarrow Road, although I'm open to other suggestions. The location between Ashford Road and Jarrow Road would result in the loss of a maximum of 3 parking spaces and minimal impact for local businesses. I understand that a similar campaign was successfully conducted for a crossing on Salter Lane relatively recently, where there are comparable issues, so I hope that this campaign can also be supported. It is only a matter of time before there is a serious accident otherwise, and I would like to ask each individual councillor for their views on this campaign, please. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Joe. Unfortunately, there's not an opportunity due to kind of governance arrangements to ask each individual councillor for a response on this. I guess I will respond on behalf of the committee to your particular request. I think it's important to thank you for bringing your petition today. I guess it's clear, isn't it, from your petition, but also from the previous petitioner, that there's a real strong desire right across the city for many more pedestrian crossings. I will come to you, Councillor Diamond, in a second. This is an area, of course, that's benefiting from significant investment already through the Ecclesall Road Safety Improvement Scheme. And I won't repeat the full list of schemes that are currently in development, as I covered those in the response to the previous petition. But you can see those on page 92 of the agenda pack, and the council's investing £3.81 million in pedestrian crossings right across the city. It does represent a significant investment, but we're busy working behind the scenes with the Mayoral Combined Authority in order to be able to enlarge that part as part of the Transport for City Region settlement. And agreements have already been gained on broad principles around this. I guess more broadly, it's genuinely encouraging to see so many residents like yourself champion the Council's Vision Zero ambitions, which of course is our commitment to eliminate all fatalities and serious injuries on Sheffield's roads. As we've heard in response to the previous petitioner, the programme for 2025 and 2026 is already fully allocated with decisions that were taken some time ago. However, the representations that you have made today will now be assessed using the agreed set of criteria that is developed on a cross-party basis by the Greens, the Liberal Democrats and Labour councillors, and that will allow us to determine whether your request can be included in future years' programmes. Now, officers will take this away and carry out that assessment outside this committee meeting, but I do want to thank you for putting forward the case today and also for gathering the views of local residents for this committee. It's really important for our work. Now, I will go to Councillor Diamond, who indicated to speak. Councillor Diamond.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks very much for the petition and for coming to the meeting today. I would like to propose that we extend the same courtesy to these petitioners, and that councillors and officers from this committee should go and visit this site as well, noting that it is very close to Hunters Bar School. And please do ensure that all members of the committee are invited. I wanted to also note that non-Labour Sheffield councillors and even council officers were not invited to the bus launch on Monday. So it is really good that everyone should be invited. Thanks.
I think that's a wonderful suggestion. I certainly would like to see us go out to visit this particular site. I think you mentioned issues with regards to the South Yorkshire's People Network and invitations that were sent out by Simca, I think, or an event that was on Eventbrite from South Yorkshire's Mail Combined Authority about their launch event. That wasn't something that this council has control over. I know I was certainly there. An invitation did appear in my inbox. I do not know why, for example, you, Councillor Diamond, did not get an invitation there, but I think it's a fair question to be asked. I'd love to come along to that. Councillor Horner.
Just one particular point. I think you said that there is a real problem about people parking on double yellow lines. Could we, although it's not within the remit of our committee, could we not suggest to parking enforcement that they pay some really serious visits to this area to pursue that, because that's something we can do very quickly. I mean, I get the point, you know, we are where we are with the programme, but if we could get parking enforcement to treat that as a priority really urgently.
Thank you, Councillor Horner. I think you're very right to note that. We'll certainly put that as part of our actions here, and we'll put a request into parking services to do that. I guess as a committee, for those people who might be following from home, there's a little bit of strange kind of abnormality, I guess, with our governance system, in a sense that parking enforcement is not part of what this committee does. It's part of a different committee's work, but we can certainly request that, and we work quite closely with that other committee and those colleagues as well. So I think Councillor Diamond makes a very important point about us going out to visit, and I can see nods from the petitioners. We'll certainly do that. We'll look forward to coming out to visit, and we'll put in that request that Councillor Horner has requested to parking services as well. So thank you very much for coming to present your petition, Joe. We'll look forward to being in touch with regards to the outcome of that assessment, and thank you very much also, Ed, for coming and supporting today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That then takes us on to the next part of our agenda, which is an opportunity for us to receive any questions from members of the public. Now, 3 remit questions have been received. The questioners have received a written response, which has been circulated to members of the public and published on the council's website. I'll just read out the supplementary questions that we have got today. We've got a supplementary question from Michael Chilton about Castlecroft parking, which is an issue that members of the committee will have heard about before as well. And I've got something from Heather Warden, and she has a supplementary question on the climate crisis. So, Michael, if you're comfortable to do so, if you come over to the microphone and if you just press, I think it's the right-hand button when you're comfortable.
Thank you for my previous answer to my question. I just want to bring a follow-up. So I've been to Castlecroft. I think the chair's alluded to that it's something that's come before this committee before. While I was there, I heard some genuinely quite distressing stories. Someone having to call 999 to basically to go to a funeral because the cars were so bad. Carers unable to park and support the people that they're there to do. But also people who just cannot navigate the pavements due to cars parked there and them being in mobility scooters. So this is something that's been raised repeatedly in the past, and you can understand that residents are very, very concerned. So I'd really appreciate, as a kind of a follow-up, to get some transport officers and the local councillors to come out and speak to residents directly and see what we can do to get some double yellow lines in, because that seems to me to be the kind of most effective solution at the moment. So I'd appreciate if that could be done. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Michael, for the work you've been doing with local residents on this particular issue. I am aware that this isn't the first time that this problem has been brought to this committee, and residents have for a very long time been seeking to tackle the issue of inconsiderate parking on the estate. I understand that you submitted a request about 3 weeks ago from checking with our officers, and I appreciate that you are continuing to raise this on behalf of the community. Officers within our city transport service are now scoring your request against a city-wide set of criteria and will await the outcome of that scoring. If you've got any other particular information about that exact locations on the street, then please do get in touch with us. And there's a particular email address called DYL, so double yellow line, .consultation at sheffield.gov.uk that either yourself or other members of the public can get in touch with us about double yellow line requests. As I guess you can appreciate, we do receive a really high volume of requests each year, and those often total thousands, but only have limited resources to deliver a number of schemes annually. Yesterday, colleagues met on a cross-party basis to discuss our approach to such requests, and we do intend to implement some changes in the new municipal year to make it clearer and fairer for residents when it comes to requests for double yellow lines. As officers are currently scoring your request on behalf of the committee, I can't confirm whether it will be prioritised at this stage, but I can assure you that it will be given full consideration. Safety, of course, is a key factor in decision making, and schemes that improve pedestrian safety are often given priorities. Now, our double yellow line programme runs on an annual cycle, and it's funded as a whole rather than individual schemes. So as an indicative example, because you asked, I think, for costings on things, the 2024 and 2025 programme cost approximately 60,000 and delivered approximately 15 locations across the city. But having spoken to colleagues on a cross-party basis right across our committee about this matter and more broadly yesterday, I know that there's a real strong desire for us to consider and cover many more locations and to investigate different ways of doing so, including making better use of Transport for City Regions funding when it does arrive with us, particularly when it is a pressing road safety concern, which I know that you have mentioned in your representations today. As I think you are already aware, in the past, through local area committees, some local councils have chosen to fund small transport improvements independently of this programme using the community infrastructure levy or other portions of funding. And sometimes with different interventions, that can be quite an effective way to deliver localised schemes much more quickly. So, for example, I know that Councillor Moynihan and Councillor Dodds have successfully used SIL funding to support improvements at the top of the steel steps at South Street, helping what will hopefully be to reduce antisocial behaviour in that part of the neighbourhood. And I, of course, would encourage you to work with your local councillors so that you can explore alternative funding routes such as this, if that is a possible source. So please do keep sharing any further evidence or feedback from residents. We will keep you updated with our assessments as well. And thank you very much for coming in today.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Diamond.
Thank you very much, Chair. And yeah, thanks for coming with the petition. It is actually something that a location that we did discuss at our knowledge briefing yesterday, because it is a significant safety issue. The problem stems with people trying to access the school and the college and parking in the wrong place where they shouldn't be. And I'd just also like to note that this was previously considered to be part of a bigger residential parking scheme, which was twice rejected by, unfortunately, the Labour and Lib Dem councillors on this committee. So, you know, that would have been a solution, but unfortunately it was rejected at the time.
Absolutely, and thank you very much for noting that. I think if we do recall, we had a consultation. In fact, I think we had 2 consultations at the time with members of the public in that particular part of the city in Norfolk Park. Firstly, I think on an expanded residence parking scheme, and I think then on a smaller parking scheme. On the basis of responses from members of the public, and I think this committee is mindful to be guided by responses from members of the public, the overwhelming majority of residents didn't want a residence parking scheme in that particular area. So I think the committee was minded to take a view not to progress with that residence parking scheme. You know, I think that's with regret, and I think it suggests to us that much more engagement is needed when we do consult with members of the public when it comes to residence parking scheme. And I know that at the time, because I was on the committee at the time, members of the committee felt very uncomfortable with progressing with a parking scheme that didn't have the support of residents or a large number of residents in that particular area. Councillor Shaw, I think you were indicating, I think then we probably do need to move on.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, it's just a point of clarification that none of the Lib Dem councillors on this committee voted against that scheme that Councillor Diamond highlighted, a parking scheme. I supported it at the time, and other councillors who are here are no longer part of this committee. So I just wanted to clarify that inaccurate information Councillor Diamond just said.
I think for a kind of the record, it would be impossible for us at this moment to be able to check who voted for what. Quite clearly, the committee took a decision not to progress with that particular residence parking scheme, and it needed the majority of committee in order to make that decision. It was some years ago, and perhaps we can clarify that using some of our internal records. But your representations there, Councillor Shaw, I think have been made clear. Colleagues and Michael, thank you very much for bringing your petition today. We'll certainly be in touch with you with regards to the outcome of that assessment, so thank you very much for bringing your petition today. Our next petitioner is from Heather Warden, and it is a supplementary question with regards to the climate crisis. And I think, Heather, you've also invited members of the committee to come along to the much broader climate briefing as well, and no doubt members of the committee will look forward to taking you up on that kind offer as well. So, Heather, if you're comfortable to do so, if you could introduce yourself, that would be brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Heather Worden. I attend South Yorkshire Climate Alliance meetings. And together we've worked on this supplementary question to the previous question we'd asked. So thank you for your response. It's on your website. It acknowledges that the climate emergency is severe. However, the question that I asked was about the situation in which the measures, the list of climate actions Sheffield City Council has taken or is due to take, including by working with partners across the city, we're not coming remotely close to achieving the critical climate targets for CO2 from the Tyndall Centre report. Do you think that the current and planned measures are sufficient to achieve those targets? Please note the screening of the People's Emergency Briefing I mentioned is on the 8th of April, not the 7th as in your reply. It's 7 till 9 p.m. and I've emailed you, Councillor Miskell, with the details. I'm grateful for your positive response about this film, which it will be important for all councillors to watch as soon as possible, especially as the climate emergency becomes ever more obvious to everybody, and your and everybody's mitigation, adaptation and resilience actions become ever more urgent. We hope your public will be watching this film as well. A better future is possible. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for coming along to the committee today, and thank you very much for your original question and your supplementary question. I guess, like we mentioned in the ante-room a short while ago, because of the 24-hour turnaround for supplementary questions, officers didn't have enough time to help draft a comprehensive response on behalf of the committee. However, I think in direct response for your question, I am very clear that you asked the committee whether it believes that the current and planned measures in Sheffield, and indeed I guess across towns and cities across the UK and around the world, are sufficient to tackle the climate crisis. And I think it's safe to say that every one of us would answer, no, they're not yet sufficient. This, I guess, is precisely why we are doing work as a council and with partners right across the city, and we continue to do so and develop that work at pace. I encourage you to stay for the item 9 on our agenda today, which is the Sustainability and Climate Change Update. It's on page 59 to 48 of the agenda pack, and it covers a wide range of important work, including our flood resilience programme, our Built for Change work with young people and adapting school buildings, our local area energy plan setting out how we decarbonise the city's energy system, the development of a business and economy decarbonisation route map, so working with the whole city to reduce emissions from economic activity. Of course, it's fair to say that whilst the council is driving forward significant cuts to its own emissions but needs to do more, one of the most important roles is convening the city as a whole, and that means bringing partners together to accelerate climate action. This is increasingly the space in which we are operating, and is one of the reasons why we have funded the Sheffield Energy Hub. And thank you very much for your kind invitation to that screening, which is taking place within that hub on the 8th of April. And I know that committee members, myself included, will do our very best to attend. Later on in the agenda, I think on page 159 to 178, you'll also find an update on the work we are doing as a city on heat zoning as part of Sheffield's advanced zoning programme. This is really vital work that helps shape how we decarbonise the way we heat our homes, businesses and public buildings in the city, and I hope you'll be able to stay for the presentations and discussions that happen on that item again today. So thank you again for the work that you are doing in this particular space, both independently but also with the Climate Alliance. The support and I think the challenge that you provide and the positive approach that you bring to working with us as a council is really, really appreciated. Thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, that brings to a close item 5, which is public questions and petitions. We've heard from 2 petitions and also we've heard from 2 supplementary questions as well. And thank you very much, colleagues, also for chipping in as well. It does certainly help in the flow and to show that this is a 3-party administration that we operate in across both Labour, the Liberal Democrats and the Green Party. Item 6 is an opportunity to receive member questions. Questions have been received from Councillor Rustling. A written response has been provided and published on the Council's website this morning. We are... I don't think we've received a supplementary question from... Oh, Councillor Rustling isn't on. Apologies. I'm just looking at my notes here. I think this is a typo. And I think it might have come over from a previous committee. Yeah, we haven't received any member questions because Councillor Rustling is not on our committee at all. He is on a very different committee. He might have questions for us, but he hasn't on this occasion. Item 7 is an opportunity to receive our work programme. So we'll move to that. That's on page 25 of our agenda pack. And Amanda will take us through any significant changes. Amanda.
Apologies, Chair, for that. That was entirely my error and a typo, as explained. Very little to note in terms of changes to the work programme. As the Chair explained, this is the final meeting of this municipal year, and so we'll be having our work programming session as soon as we get past the election and discover the makeup of the new committee. But a couple of things to note. There was a referral from Council on the 4th of February with regards to free public transport for young people, and that referral was made to this committee. However, that has now been moved to SNR due to the budget implications on that. And if we refer back to the meetings of the previous meeting, I think it was Councillor Diamond that asked about some specific items and where they would feature on the work programme. So in particular, the waterways and the annual climate statement, which we hope will be addressed today by our climate update that we're going to receive, and also the e-bike hire scheme we're expecting in July 2026, and the parking plan in October. So once we are able to formulate the new work programme, obviously those will be slotted into the relevant agendas.
Thank you very much, Amanda. For the awareness of committee, I should probably also flag that Robin Hughes from Hallamshire Historic Buildings has been in touch with me to ask about the conservation area. Colleagues will recall that we have approved, following public consultation, work on a conservation area in the city centre. We have, however, received a briefing on potentially expanding the conservation area, or to introduce another conservation area, which may well include, for example, Victoria Quays and the Wicker. I think during our discussions, and colleagues, you might well correct me, I seem to recall that we said that that would go on to the work programme. We didn't necessarily have a date for that particular work, but I think the feeling of committee at the time during our briefing was that we didn't want that to be lost when changes to the committee inevitably happen in the new municipal year. And I think Robin has flagged up with me that it isn't on our work programme. Can I just get some confirmation from colleagues that that was our agreed course of action? I'm seeing nodding. Councillor Diamond, was that kind of, is my recollection correct there?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think we agreed that it would be post 2027, but we should have it on the work plan to make sure it doesn't get missed off. Because there's, I think we had advice that we wouldn't be looking at it before then, but just to note that it should be on the work programme going forward.
Thank you. That's really helpful clarification. So we will make sure that that does go on the work programme, obviously noting that we can't at this stage add a date to that. That doesn't mean to say that this work won't be prioritised, but we don't want it to be lost. Councillor Riddle, I know that you're also the Council's Heritage Champion. I'll allow you to come in there.
Thanks, yes. I was just going to endorse that because that was exactly the spirit in which the Planning Committee who made that recommendation asked for that to happen, so that it didn't get lost without a particular date in mind, but to actually include it on the work plan simply for that reason that it was there as a longer term consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Riddle and Councillor Diamond. With the committee's consent, therefore, bearing in mind the discussions that we had outside this place in our knowledge briefing, we'll seek to add that to further iterations of our work programme. It's a document that does constantly evolve, and I think that does show that members of the public writing in Robin Hughes, flagging that particular issue, allows us to kind of correct any anomalies that might well have developed. Okay, colleagues, are you content, therefore, with approving the work programme? I can see Councillor Gamble-Pugh. Councillor Gamble-Pugh.
I've got two things to say.
We'll look forward to them.
One is, can you advise me, I have had a big issue in my ward this week with Yorkshire Water closing one of the main roads through to Ecclesfield, Cross Hill, and it's reminded myself and people in the community that we had taken a vote at a full council meeting in October to introduce the lane rental charge, and my recollection was that that had then been referred here, but I don't see it on the work plan unless I'm mistaken. I'd just like to check where that has gone, because it's very fresh in our minds that we need to hold utility companies to account in terms of how they affect the public with their roadworks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gamble-Pugh, and I think his recollection is entirely correct. As I understand it, we had a full council motion about lane rental pricing, which is quite a complicated way of saying, you know, to utility providers to get the work done quickly and to stop disrupting this city. You are right to mention particularly Yorkshire Water, but there are other offenders when it comes to this as well. As I understand it, our officers have now been tasked with developing a scheme and are doing so. I can see that Will Stewart is just nodding. I will just go to Will, and I think I'd be minded to just make sure that it was on our work programme in order to just be able to kind of double check this work in the future and that it doesn't get lost from one municipal year to another. But Will, I'll just hand over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Gamble-Pugh. Yeah, the Chair's correct. We are now exploring implementing lane rental as part of our ongoing enforcement activity in highways network management. So that work's underway. It's quite a complex process, so it's going to take a little bit of time, but I will make sure that it features on the work plan for the next municipal year, because the work has already begun on that. I guess two main elements. The first is making sure that we've got the right powers and there are legal considerations to work through, and we're working closely with legal colleagues on that. And secondly, how it dovetails with our other enforcement activity. But yeah, I can assure members that it is firmly underway, and we will be progressing that scheme.
Thank you very much. So we'll make sure that that is added to our work programme, and that it certainly is captured. It came from a full council motion, didn't it? So Councillor Campbell-Pugh, I think you had a second question or second point to make.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. With regard to the work plan, it's encouraging to see that there are a number of items on there that are addressing the climate crisis, and I'd like to just personally thank Heather from the Climate Alliance for coming along. But I do have a point which I think I've made at almost every meeting of this committee for the past 4 years. Having been re-elected back onto the council after a period of being the co-chair of the Climate Alliance, it's really important to me, and it's important to the city and the planet as a whole, that we take the climate crisis really seriously. And I know we have a lot of business in terms of transport and regeneration, but I would just like to again make my perennial call that we should always make sure that we have a proportionate balance of business before this committee that addresses the urgency and the severity of the climate crisis, and we shouldn't let that slip. And I do push that issue every time, and I appreciate your indulgence, Chair, in letting me repeat the point, but I think it's a point that warrants repeating. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell-Pugh, and you do champion these issues at each and every meeting, so thank you very much for doing that. And I think it's probably important just to re-emphasise that particular point in the response that I gave on behalf of the committee, and no doubt members of the committee would agree with me. You know, the question that we received from the questioner today from the Climate Alliance was, you know, do we think that enough has been done? Well, quite categorically, no, we do not think that things are sufficient at the moment. This isn't to say that we are not doing some great work as a city, but it does mean to say that much more needs to be done. And as a council, we are stepping much more into the space of convening, bringing people together in order to bring about a city-wide response to the climate crisis. We know we've done that through things like the climate bonds. More recently, we've raised over £1 million through that municipal climate bond. Citizens of the city coming together to tackle the climate crisis, but we need to do much more when it comes to that. Councillor Diamond.
I'm trying to log off. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just wanted a bit of clarity on the work plan in terms of when the annual climate report, when we might expect to see it, because I recall last year we took it in February, so I think the earliest now would get it would maybe be June, but that'd be useful to know when that might come. And then also we're having an update today on the local area energy plan, and that's also on the agenda for a future work plan. I'm just wondering if that's duplication, or if it's a report later on that we have to make a decision on, rather than what today it's more of an update included in the sustainability update.
Thank you very much, Councillor Diamond. I've just kind of taken some views here, and I think it might be appropriate if you were happy to do so, if in the report that we're going to be receiving later, that might be an item or matter that our Assistant Director for City Sustainability, Andy Noland, is able to pick up in the item that's later on the agenda to do with sustainability. Would you be content with that approach? I know it's something that you and other members of this committee feel very passionately about. I can see that you're nodding. You're happy with that approach? Yes, thank you very much. Colleagues, with that and with those questions and clarifications and additions, are colleagues content with approving the work programme as something that the committee wants to progress with? I can see that colleagues are sort of nodding. There's no dissent, so thank you very much. That approves our work programme. So we then move into the substantive items for decision and discussion at our committee meeting today. Just for some guidance for each of the substantive items on the agenda today, please could I remind everyone of the process that we're going to follow. The officers will be invited to present their reports to the committee. Members and the public have had access to the report in advance, and This will then be followed by questions from members to the officers. Once all the questions have been asked and responses provided, if members are minded to do so, we'll then move on to a discussion. So that's an opportunity for you to make any points that don't necessarily require an answer. After any discussion has taken place, the recommendations would be then agreed on or not by the committee, and we'll take a vote if that is necessary. So thank you, colleagues, for following that particular guidance. So item 8 is an opportunity for us to consider the Q3 budget monitoring, which is a standard item that comes before this committee so that we're aware of the broader council position when it comes to finances. It's for 2025-2026 Q3, and it's on page 37 of your agenda pack. Jane, thank you very much for coming to the committee to take us through this today.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Jane Wilby, Assistant Director of Finance and Accounting, and I'm here to briefly introduce the Q3 Budget Monitoring Report for 25-26 with a particular focus on the Transport, Regen and Climate Committee. So members will be aware that the report has already been considered by the Finance and Performance Committee, so today I'll keep it the wider council context high level and focus on committee budgets, performance, risks and key issues to note. So at a council-wide level, the Q3 position shows a continued improvement in our in-year finances. The forecast overspend has reduced from 23.6 million at Q2 to 18.9 million at Q3, which is a 4.7 million improvement over that quarter. The improvement reflects sustained progress in SEN transport, some stabilisation in children's services, and the impact of stronger corporate spend controls and recruitment restrictions. However, it is important to be clear that significant pressures remain, particularly in adult social care and areas driven by demand and market costs. So while the direction of travel is improving, the overall position still requires tight financial discipline through the rest of the year. So turning now to this committee's position, at Q3, the Transport, Regen and Climate Committee is forecasting a net underspend of around 1 million against its approved 39 million net revenue budget. This is a positive position overall, and it does include a mix of favourable movements and emerging risks. The underspend is mainly driven by increased income from coordination and permit activity in highways, which has performed more strongly than budget and prior forecasts. Salary underspends due to vacancies and recruitment slippage across parts of the services, including transport, sustainability and scheme design. Some external income, for example, funding supporting programmes such as Mode Shift Stars. These factors together more than offset some of the pressures elsewhere in the portfolio. The most significant pressure is planning and building standards, where we are seeing lower than expected planning income, reflecting reduced activity levels. And there's also a smaller overspend on the local plan, driven by increased hearing and legal costs. These pressures are being actively managed, but they do highlight the ongoing sensitivity of income-dependent services to market conditions. In response, services are keeping planning income forecasts under close review, actively monitoring workload and cost drivers, and considering the potential for future fee increases, where this is permissible, as part of longer-term sustainability planning. At this stage, there are no immediate in-year mitigations required, but the areas remain under close financial scrutiny going into Q4. Looking ahead, the Council now has the benefit of a multi-year funding settlement, which gives us greater certainty over the next few years and allows us to plan with more confidence than we have been able to in the past. That does give us some comfort in the short to medium term. However, it doesn't remove the underlying cost and demand challenges, nor does it reduce the need to modernise. For Transport, Climate and Regen Committee, this means that continuing to focus on income resilience, ensuring that staffing models are sustainable rather than vacancy-driven, and aligning investment and service design with the wider Future Sheffield transformation programme. Future Sheffield is critical to moving away from those short-term mitigations and towards longer-term financial sustainability through modernisation, productivity improvements and better use of data and digital tools. So in summary, Chair, the Q3 position for the committee is positive overall with a forecast underspend. There are clear risks around planning income and cost pressures that we're managing closely, and the medium-term focus remains on transformation, modernisation and sustainability, even with the improved funding certainty. The report is to note the financial position. I'm happy to take any questions or explore any aspects of the budgets in more detail alongside service colleagues. Thank you.
And
Thank you very much, Jane, for bringing this particular item today. We know it's a standing item. It's still very important for us to be able to be mindful of the wider council's corporate position when it comes to finances. And colleagues, do I see any questions on this particular item for Jane or members of the services? I don't. Jane, thank you for bringing it for us today. It's really appreciated. I'm just going to ask colleagues whether they are content with the recommendations for approval. They're on page 38 of your agenda pack. Colleagues, can I see some nods if you are content with approving that? I've seen no one raising their hand to dissent, so thank you very much, colleagues. That has therefore been approved. Jane, thank you very much for bringing it today and for briefing us out of this place about this as well. That therefore moves us on to item 9, which is a very important item. It's our sustainability and climate change update. It's on page 59 of the agenda pack. And our Assistant Director for City Sustainability, Andy Noland, will be presenting alongside many members of his team. And it is very good to see that your team is expanding and has been expanding over the last few years, which represents the commitment that this council has to tackling the climate crisis. Andy, I'll hand over to you and members of your team, and if you'd be happy to do so, if colleagues from your team could introduce themselves, that would be really appreciated. And also, I think Councillor Diamond had a question as well during previous business. If you would be able to reflect on that, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We have a presentation to aid the document, so if that can, and have you got a clicker? Okay. So my name is Andy Nolan. I'm Assistant Director of City Sustainability based in City Futures, and here with three of my colleagues, James Mead, Service Manager for Flood and Water, Victoria Penman, who's a Sustainability Programme Officer and has led on the Built for Change programme, and Matt Hutton, who is a Sustainability Programme Officer and has led on the Climate Investment and Solar for Schools. And they in turn will take you through their elements of the report. Catherine Warrington, who's also here on the heat networks and advanced zoning work of the, is on a separate paper and agenda for today. So we're going to give you a summary of update of 6 key initiatives which we as the sustainability team leading on or have been heavily engaged in. It's not all that's happening across the council by all means, with teams in housing, facilities management, parks, countryside, transport and planning, and many others delivering programmes of work that will make a real difference to citizens of Sheffield. So without any ado, I'll pass over to James for his update.
Thanks very much. Hi, so Andy had introduced me. I'm James Mead, Flood and Water Service Manager. I think several of you know me already from previous appearances. I'm here today going to report on our ongoing flood protection programme and flood resilience programme. It's a key time for the programme because we are coming to the end of the Environment Agency's current programme period and moving into a new programme period from April this year, which has got a change in focus of how projects are funded. So we are needing to do a review of projects in development and projects going forward. But we do think this presents quite a good opportunity for Sheffield due to the nature of the work that we are on with and that we're looking to take forward. So just these are in the report, but just highlighting the ongoing projects that we have in delivery at the moment
and these are not affected by any changes in programme or funding rules. These are ongoing. These are already through business case and progressing. So we were on site with repairs to a significantly deep culvert up in Deepcar. We've had to pause some of that work through the exceptionally wet weather we had in January and February. It just wasn't possible to get onto the site. They are back on site in the next few weeks, and we're expecting to complete that piece of work this summer, which is going to relieve the flood risk to a number of properties there that flooded quite severely back in 2019. Have been sort of living with this kind of hanging over them since. We've had to have a temporary pumping arrangement in place with significant revenue costs and more to that, you know, the worry that's placed upon the residents. Ecclesfield Park, again, we're kind of waiting for better weather, as is a bit of a theme on some of these projects. We have a flood relief channel that runs through Ecclesfield Park that was installed after flooding in 2007 and 2019. And effectively what we're up to is a significant improvement to that for functional and environmental and amenity reasons, to make that channel more effective, but also to incorporate some planting and some environmental improvements there. Carbrook is now fully funded. The funding has been secured through the Flood Committee at the last round of committees, January. And we will be on site later this year. You won't see a lot on the surface. There's predominantly works to culverts and underground risks in that area through the Darnell area, which we know has been an area that's had numerous localised issues of flooding. The key projects that are affected by the change to the funding regime and the change to the allocation are our two major schemes. The Upper Don scheme, which the business case is in with the EA for consideration, and we're expecting a response in the next few weeks. We are confident of technical approval and assurance of that project from the Environment Agency. The issues are regarding allocation under the new funding rules, which we're waiting to hear when we may be able to get funding to take that project forward, so raising that for awareness. Our Sheaf and Porter scheme, which is in development, will be going forward under the new funding rules. So we've got a piece of work to address how that works. We are quite confident, though, that the new funding rules do work in our favour to that scheme in terms of the prioritisation of areas of deprivation, the prioritisation of growth and development, and the opportunities for natural flood management within that scheme. Our future programme, this is kind of, now we've got a new programme and we're seeing the new rules in place, we are looking at an increased focus on nature-based approaches across the Upper Don and Sheaf catchment areas in particular. And there is an opportunity to revisit asset replacement, refurbishment, of which things like culverts and existing flood walls will be something that we will be looking at. Wider delivery, we are looking at more partnership opportunities. The work we did, the Limbrook demonstrator project, which we've shared with this committee previously, works with Steel Valley up in the Upper Don, Stocksbridge and Deepcar area. And looking for potential opportunities through development gain. We're talking with the works in the Moorfoot area, where there are definitely some opportunities for more deculverting through that stretch, some bankside enhancements. There's actually, I didn't mention it specifically in the report, but there is some considerations of historic weirs and existing structures in the channel in the lower Porter Brook, which we're hoping we might be able to facilitate some environmental improvements there. We are supporting Yorkshire Water's investment, which I'll come on to on the last slide. And it's just a note really that as the local plan, I won't talk about the local plan specifically, but as the local plan does come through, there are significant improvements and updates to policies in relation to flood risk and water management and water resources, water demand in the new local plan, which will help our team in facilitating what we're looking to deliver that. So, final slide. And this is predominantly for awareness of the scale of the programme. And I sort of listening to Councillor Campbell-Pugh's comment about Yorkshire Water digging roads up, there's going to be a lot of Yorkshire Water digging roads up over the coming period. They have a £1.4 billion investment in reducing storm overflows effectively. And this is prioritised sort of end of pipe is what we're kind of talking about as I refer in there, which is very much what comes out of the pipe. So this is about reducing sewer spills into rivers, into watercourses. That's all great, but it does kind of create challenges in that really from a city perspective and from our team's perspective, we'd love to get a lot more upstream solutions to these problems. We'd love to be looking at dealing with surface water before it gets into the network, looking at upstream nature-based solutions. And the speed at which the 2025 to 2030 programme has been pushed out has caused us real issues. They have got a 20% target for a blue-green element in that, but the reality of that in the timescale that we're talking about is really, really challenging. So we are looking through Connected by Water and through our relationships with Yorkshire Water to do much better from 2030. Yorkshire Water are employing a specific officer to look at nature-based solutions in this programme, and they've got a particular focus on Sheffield as they feel it's a real area where they can achieve more from 2030 onwards. And we hope to improve on that 20% aim. But there's two parts of this. One is to highlight there's a lot of work going on. There will be a lot of disruption. We are in conversation with Yorkshire Water at various kind of specific sites already. Officers from our team, officers from parks, officers from highways, highway networks in terms of road closures and such like have been meeting and discussing this priority programme that is ongoing. It is citywide, but there is more in the west because of the nature of the sewer networks that we've got, where there are more combined sewers, there are more of these investments going in. So areas of kind of dense Victorian terraced housing kind of areas are where we have the biggest load in the combined sewer network. More recently built developments tend to have a separate surface water sewer network, which doesn't create the same kind of problems. But yeah, our team has been meeting with them, we've been out on site, and we will feed that information through as best we can. But this is a big programme, this is a priority programme, this is happening quick, and Yorkshire Water have a kind of remit to crack on with this, so we will be trying to communicate as best we can, but there will be disruption. So that's us.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Chair. So I'm just providing a short update on the Built for Change work, which is a public health focused programme supporting schools to adapt to the changing climate and particularly to extreme weather. Came to you in September when you approved a grant fund to support 12 education settings with, say, small grants to help them to adapt. They've also been receiving support to develop their climate action plans and will be receiving support to develop behavioural changes as well. So since then, there's been quite a lot of progress. All 12 pilot settings have now received their audits and are in the process of receiving their grants. 3 of those settings have already, well, I think more now, have already started installing their interventions. We've got a wide range of interventions that they've been choosing. So the most popular things have been different types of outdoor shading, so whether shade sails or kind of outdoor classroom structures. A lot of the schools have significant problems with outdoor shade. Solar film has also been very popular. We've also got a number of others. So one school is installing a green roof, which will help to kind of both insulate, also kind of reduce water runoff, and obviously add to nature and biodiversity. We've got a few sustainable drainage, water harvesting. So there's quite a few different types of intervention. So those are hopefully, majority of those will be in before the summer heat. but if not, the remainder should be installed over the summer holidays. We've got a few grade 2 listed buildings, which there's a bit more kind of process to manage with those, but that seems to be going well so far. We've also been delivering other interventions. So, for example, we've been holding webinars to support schools to understand heat management within their buildings, understand their building energy management systems. That's come up as being a kind of a strong theme, that schools are often struggling with the complex heating systems that they have. One of our partners, Sheffield Hallam, has received additional funding from the MAC Hub, which is Maximising Adaptation and Climate Change Hub. So we'll be working with them and with schools to support continuing professional development for teachers and developing kind of climate adaptation learning sessions for children as well. One of the things, my favourite things, I think, that we've done so far has been our Youth Takeover Day, when we have 5 students from Sheffield College come in for the council for a day, experience what it's like to work in the council. It was during Green Careers Week, so it's perfect timing. It's also kind of a youth voice opportunity. They also came and spoke to the steering group for Built for Change as well, which was incredibly powerful. And I'd just like to read a couple of quotes from that. You've got one there on the screen. There is a report appended to the main report as well. So it was very, very clear from what they were saying, very powerful, really kind of moving, but also very insightful input from the young people. So one there is about noting, particularly relevant for this committee, my area doesn't really have bus stops, shelters, because they just get bricked in. If the glass or plastic is going to get broken, can't they build them from something more sturdy, kind of brick or something? There was lots of really insightful kind of comments, but it was also kind of really powerful hearing the extent to which children who are experiencing poverty, deprivation, other challenges are more impacted than other children and young people in this area. So, for example, one was talking here, me and my sister were suffering. We shared a room with bunk beds, so I was at the highest point of the house on the top bunk. So it was even more warm for me at that highest point. Because we had the door open for breeze, we could also hear everything my mum was watching on TV, so that stopped us from sleeping. So you're listening to children talking about sleep deprivation, sleeping on the floor downstairs because it's the coolest point of the house, and then going into school, having to walk into school a lot of the time. None of the children talked about cars. There was a lot of talk about walking, a lot about talking about lack of shade, about kind of walking over fields that kind of didn't have a path because it was the quickest route. And then getting to school, either very tired from lack of sleep, from having already had that additional walk, or soaked through because they've had to walk in the rain or wait for a bus that didn't turn up, or that, and say, with no bus shelter. So it's very, very powerful. We'll be using the learnings from, so it was only one focus group. We're going to be doing more of these. I'm going to move on to the next bit. We're going to be doing more focus groups in a wider variety of schools. So we'll be getting more learning, but we'll be using this learning to feed in not only to future grant applications, but also into other work being led by colleagues in our services and also elsewhere in the local authority and in the city. So we'll be feeding this information into Simca for some of the work that they're doing, so that these young people's voices are being heard. We've got quite a range of other things happening over the next coming months, and so this programme is funded till the end of April. We've done a couple of webinars. We've done a webinar with Ashton, which is a major climate charity, reaching local authorities. We're doing another one which will be reaching schools. We're also going to be developing guidance documents for schools, which will hopefully help with behavioural change. And so the money that we've got here will only go a small way towards making a difference. Hopefully some of that behavioural change support we can put in place might help some of the schools to make changes. And so again, young people's voice will be feeding very much into that. And then finally, towards the end of the event, we'll be holding celebration events. One kind of big central celebration event where we'll be bringing young people from schools across the city together along with decision makers. And we'll also be going out into schools, into communities, and either through school fairs or standalone events, kind of reaching into the local communities as well as into the schools themselves, and sharing kind of what the schools are doing, what the young people have been doing. That's everything from me.
Thanks, Victoria. I'm going to cover the next two items, which are the local area energy plan and the business decarbonisation roadmap. And I was really grateful to the city sustainability team that they'd already embarked on this work when I joined the council in October, because it's underpinning what the challenge really is. It's trying to take a citywide view and a strategic approach to what interventions can be made to drive down carbon emissions across the city, in businesses, in homes, in schools, in hospitals, universities, and in the workplace. So it's a citywide approach to decarbonisation, and we're currently developing the local area energy plan to be a strategic, data-driven plan that sets out how our city systems will need to change to meet our net zero ambitions in a cost-effective and locally appropriate manner. It will provide a clear evidence-based framework for Sheffield's transition to net zero. Sorry, I'll move on. It's about achieving and recognising that council has a role in tackling climate change, as the chair mentioned. It protects the planet, a responsible approach to Sheffield's long-term environmental and energy needs. It supports people in services that help keep residents warm, healthy, affordable homes and achieve their full potential. And it's about strengthening prosperity, creating conditions for investment, good jobs and a thriving economy. The LEP provides a clear evidence-based approach into what the future energy needs are of the city. Now, we're coming to the end of phase one of that project. Crucially, we're not at the end of it, and that's important because there's a certain degree of overlap between phases 1 and phase 2. So we've taken extensive modelling of the current and future energy needs, and that's been delivered by Mott MacDonald, and they've worked closely with us in terms of both the proposals but also the engagement with the community. So we've liaised and we've worked with businesses, universities, and importantly the community energy network that we have in the city that's so strong. In the coming weeks, we're going to procure a commercialisation element of it, which will take the outputs from phase 1, and they'll continue to work with Mott MacDonald over that period so that they can come up with a package or packages of investable propositions for us to consider. So at the end of the process, and that will be, I'll come on to the timescales, but that will give us both the technical needs and the financial needs of the local area energy plan. The phase 3 is really about the implementation and the community energy element, and discussing outputs with communities and moving projects into delivery. So really hitting the ground and doing some projects. Now, importantly, I think Councillor Diamond mentioned this. This is only an update, and we will bring the full report to members at due course in the programme. That's a little bit hard to see, but we're moving into stage 5 and stage 6 of the programme. So we're taking the scenario refinement and selection. We're creating those needs, and we're understanding what those needs might be. and we're going to turn them into a plan that identifies some quick wins, but also the harder elements of the plan itself. So that's a bit easier to see, but we're agreeing the priorities now, so what we act upon, and we're using a wide range of stakeholders to influence and inform that process. We're out to procure phase 2 shortly, and that will likely give us a wide range of indications are that there's a wide range of consultants out there who can interrogate and commercialise the packages of work. And then we'll review the draft LAEP and we'll bring it back to committee in about August or September time this year. Okay. Now, members have got a bit of a sneak preview today because this is going to the Economic Development, Skills and Culture Policy Committee on the 26th. But I don't think I'm letting the cat out of the bag in a meaningful way. But we've developed the 7th of our route maps in the city to identify how we're going to help businesses develop plans and action plans for their decarbonisation journey. So objectives were shaped by using direct business insights. So we've worked very hard with actual businesses. We've gone out there and spoken to them, and it's been, in effect, co-designed by business and the council. And the one-to-one engagement, group activity, and oversight by a business-orientated steering group. That is important because every business is at a different stage of the journey. Some are heavily into decarbonisation. They're actively regulated on those emissions and factors, and others are more business sense and making it so that they remain competitive despite the carbon emissions that they are driving down. So we've reduced, the guide will explain to businesses how they can reduce carbon emissions while remaining competitive and viable. They'll identify where decarbonisation delivers cost savings, financial benefits and long-term resilience, and they'll take a city-wide approach, linking with existing strategies, policies and indeed programmes and projects. Recognising that businesses are all at different stages, they will give advice dependent upon that stage that they're at. And the work sets out clear and practical actions businesses can realistically take. So set alongside the support required, funding advice, skills and peer learning, and provides a framework for ongoing action. And I'm pleased to say that the Chamber of Commerce is taking an active role in that, in its delivery and support. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you very much, Andy. Thank you, Chair. So I'm here to give an update on the Sheffield Climate Investment and then the subsequent projects coming from that. So just to give a reminder, the Sheffield Climate Investment is a municipal investment product, so it enables local citizens to invest in green projects. Financial return is kind of competitive with ISAs. The risk is minimal, but the real value is engaging with those communities that are invested in green projects. So just a little bit of background. So February 24, full council passed a motion for us to explore local climate bonds. We went away and we did that. December 24, Strategy and Resource Committee then agreed that we should build up a more detailed proposal, which we did, and we brought that back to Strategy and Resource Committee in November 25, and they agreed with the proposal to launch a local climate bond called the Sheffield Climate Investment, and they also approved 4 more launches up to £2 million each. So in December 2025, we launched the local climate bond seeking to raise £1 million. We were very, very successful. We ended up closing the investment 1.5 months early, and this marks only the third time this has occurred, with over 26 raises conducted by Abundance for other councils. We also had really strong local participation, so this was one of our key performance indicators. So the campaign achieved 35% local investment, so that's the second highest Abundance has ever seen, again across those 26 raises, but it is the highest for any city region to date, so the raise was a tremendous success. So what we're planning to do with that £1 million? So we're planning to do a solar on schools project. So we have already conducted feasibility on all our maintained schools with a few exclusions. Only around 25 of the schools, maintained schools, are actually feasible to have solar put on them for different reasons, mainly to do with either roof structure or just the economics around the solar, so the consumption of the school profile or the amount of roof space the schools have got. So the schools are going through an onboarding process at the moment, and we're looking to start a procurement process in the next month to procure a design and build contractor to deliver this programme. Detailed designs will then take place in this summer coming, summer 2026, and then installs will be in spring 2027. So the 20 maintained schools that we predict will be able to deliver with this £1 million, obviously there will be some slight change as we go through the design process. It will be around about 1 megawatt of solar. It'll save the schools around £630,000 over the 25-year agreement that we have with them for the panels, and it'll save about 151 tonnes of CO2 annually, and that's about approximately 1% of the council's emissions. And that's me done.
Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you very much, Andy and colleagues, Victoria, James and Matt, for taking us through those reports. It was really appreciated. Of course, that shines a spotlight on quite a bit of the council's work when it comes to tackling the climate crisis, but there's much more as well, so thank you very much for doing that. I did see Councillor Hogan indicating, then I'll go to Councillor Diamond, and I'll also go to Councillor Mesereau, and then Councillor Horner. Councillor Hogan.
Thank you, Ben. First of all, just Matt, this is the very last figure you gave about the schools, the 63k. Can you just clarify, is that the total saving over 25 years for 25 schools? Because my quick calculation is £100 per school per year. Is that what we're talking about, or is it? I mean, just clarification, please.
Yeah, no problem. So that's per school. So it is over the 25 years, but that is 63k per school over 25 years.
Excellent. It's James about the water flood-based solutions you're talking about. You've got Yorkshire Water gets a mention. Simca, I noticed, no mention. It has an emergent local nature recovery strategy, which we've had a couple of detailed briefing about that, and they're talking a lot of flooding more upstream. They're talking about the reintroduction of the Eurasian beaver in Sheffield and all that. How much input have you had into local nature recovery strategy? Because one of the things that, as the scrutiny committee yesterday forced, is that it has no legal basis, and as a consequence of that, we have asked that to look at how they can basically ask the government to toughen up the legal basis of the local nature recovery strategy, because it has no force whatsoever. And what has your input been into this, and how closely are you working with Simca?
Councillor, happy to answer that one. Yes, we have, personally, and the broader Connected by Water team have been extensively involved in the development of particularly the mapping of the opportunity mapping that comes out of the LNRS. So we've fed in, there's a piece of work being done by the Environment Agency of natural flood management opportunity mapping, which is fed directly into the LNRS. Effectively, the LNRS is a bit of the product that we will get out of that is the map that shows us where these opportunities would be good things to put in. From our team's perspective, working with the Environment Agency and working with Yorkshire Water, we're looking to bring that funding in that enables us to do that work. So the Environment Agency has identified a proportion of their funding in the next programme. Yorkshire Water are looking to set aside monies from their CSO programme towards that. And so we're working with those colleagues through Connected by Water to bring funding in order to deliver projects that the LNRS mapping says these are good projects, these are good places to work. The LNRS doesn't in itself deliver those projects, but what it gives us is a clear map of opportunities of where it's a good place to do those. And I mentioned the Sheaf catchment and the Upper Don. So the Sheaf catchment and the top end of the Don catchment, some of which is in Sheffield, but some of which steps over into Barnsley, have been identified as really key areas for that kind of investment. So we'll be seeking those funds. Our colleagues across in Barnsley will be seeking such funds. And there are other players in this as well, like the Sheffield and Rotherham Wildlife Trust, who are looking for opportunities around Bradfield and Oak Hill Farm that they have up there. And then we do liaise with the Moors for the Future group as well up that way. So yeah, our team links very closely with our Parks and Countryside colleagues. This will all help to feed into the work on the blue-green strategy as that comes to fruition later this year as well. So yeah, the LNRS doesn't achieve these outcomes, but the LNRS does give us a clear kind of roadmap in order for us to focus our investment going forward, which is what we'll be doing.
Thanks for that. I've got a question for Victoria. My question is, you've talked about the projects and your next steps, and it's about embedding into the system so that a lot of the work you're doing is then repeated by the organisation do it, because, you know, quite frankly, we have a party that may be in substantial numbers on this council that will basically, their first ambition will be to abolish those next steps. How many of your projects that you support mean that they're embedded into a system they can carry on after, you know, from now until eternity in effect, so that we can develop those, because there are some really clear and present threats out in parts of Sheffield which will be looking to roll back a lot of this.
Yes, so certainly that will be kind of an approach we'll be looking as we move into the next phase of this work, is looking at how we can feed the work that we are doing and the findings that we have kind of learned into kind of existing projects. So, for example, where schools are being rebuilt, ensuring that the lessons have been learned from previous school building programmes. That so a lot of the adaptations also have other benefits, and particularly with children and young people. The extreme heat is here, the extreme weather is here. If we can support schools to encourage young people, enable young people to learn more effectively, and the focus is really here on learning rather than on adaptation, on climate particularly. It's on what is real for people at the time they're experiencing it. So yes, that would be kind of a strong focus. We'll also be looking at, say, bringing in funding from outside. And again, this isn't council funding. There are lots of funding streams that will still be there and available, which we'll look to address.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, and of course, thank you, Councillor Huggan, for that particular last point. I think it's probably important to say, isn't it, that whilst we disagree sometimes on a minor number of occasions around the edges when it comes to tackling the climate emergency and many of these issues across this administration, there is a cross-party consensus as to how we address those issues. And of course, he's very right to mention that there are some in our city who do not agree with that, and this work, of course, is under threat and will be under jeopardy as a result after May this year. So we do need to be mindful of that, because we do have a cross-party consensus when it comes to tackling the climate crisis. I'll just go to Councillor Diamond and then Councillor Merzera.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, thank you for these very thorough reports, and just want to say that really appreciate the work of this small team, which arguably has the most important job in the council, which is trying to ensure the sustainability of the city and our ability to live within planetary boundaries and mitigate the immense challenges that are coming our way, including flooding, which we've talked about, and heat management, which is and the impact of these on education, employment, and then we've got food security as well. I'm really happy that the team has grown following its establishment, and recognising the years of campaigning by the public and different campaign groups and its advocacy by Green councillors over many years. And I really hope that we can fund it and keep expanding it further. On page 65, on point 2.9, you talked about the benefit of adoption of the local plan and how this will improve the work that we're doing to protect rivers and water systems, including sustainable urban development using sustainable drainage and using water more efficiently. I just wonder if you could elaborate on that a little bit more.
Yes, no problem, Councillor Dunn. Yes, so there are coming, alongside the updates to the local plan, if you delve into the policy document, there is a strengthened policy that now updates a requirement to align with the Water Framework Directive, so that relates to water quality, so that's to ensure that no new development is detrimental to water quality. There are policies with respect to reduced demand for new residential developments, which is aligned with updates to building regulations. And we have strengthened policies with respect to updated policies regarding flood risk and development. So the consideration of flood risk from all sources in the sequential and exception test process, so the siting of development now considers surface water flooding is the key issue in Sheffield. It does consider other sorts of flooding, groundwater, coastal, things like that, but for Sheffield it's predominantly bringing surface water more significantly into that consideration. And then we've also got a policy that specifically addresses the requirement to consider sustainable drainage on all developments, and we're looking to to put forward how we can help guide people towards green and blue surface suds rather than just burying plastic tanks and things under the ground. But we've not quite got to that yet, because that's a sort of post-adoption consideration of what guidance we put in place. There's always challenges with that, because to look to promote a local approach that isn't supported by national building regulations, things like that, is challenging. But it's a conversation that is going on in terms of a national ask to strengthen building regulations for new development to ensure that these things are brought in. SUDS is still a little bit in flux in terms of the considerations of whether that is to be mandated going forward, and whether Schedule 3 of the Water Management Act will come in. It's sort of feels like it's been kind of put to the other side of the National Planning Policy Framework review, which is ongoing, which you may be aware is currently out for consultation. But we've made representations into there to encourage best practice with regards sustainable drainage, green roofs, blue roofs, much more surface management of water rather than, as say, burying it under the ground. So we're hopeful we can work forward to that as planning policy evolves over the coming years.
Great, thank you. Victoria, from your report, I found that was really interesting. Some of the quotes that you gave from the young people. I think it'd be good to feed that back to the Education Policy Committee, especially in terms of things around uniform policy, which I think is really important, and also the access to bus shelters. I think something that we should really highlight with colleagues at Simca. And noting that a school in my ward that we visited reported that attendance could be 11% down on rainy days because there's no shelter when waiting for the bus. So yeah, really support that work. And in terms of the local area energy plan, I also wanted to highlight how important that is in the context at the moment of international conflict and climate change, and how we be more resilient to different events. I think you answered the question that I had already on that. Yeah, the climate bonds, brilliant success. I'm really glad that that went forward, and how quickly the public took that up was quite amazing. And just to note that motion from 2024 was actually called 5 years since declaring a climate emergency. So yeah, it's good that we've made that progress since that motion. On the decarbonisation route maps, I'm just wondering about like reporting on those. Will we be, so the relevant committee which each route map, would they be reporting that and sort of monitoring whether they're on track with those decarbonisation route maps, including a risk register or RAG rating, traffic light rating for each area that's outlined?
I would hope that that is the case, Alexi, and I think there's an opportunity for that to be further embedded in the council's work.
And finally, just on the annual climate update, do you have an idea about when we can expect to see that? Because I was just noting from, we had the papers that went to Finance Committee that said that our annual emissions as a council have increased in 2024, and we're now like way off target, the council emissions into getting to net zero. I think some of that might have been something around accounting, but it's so important. I mean, we've heard from the Climate Alliance about the film that they're showing, but there's also the national security assessment that came out on global biodiversity loss. And although the government tried to bury that report, it's really, really stark in terms of the threats that we're facing.
I can respond on the council's own emissions, which were, as you rightly say, it was a bit of an anomaly when 2023 was probably what's the word? The reporting was low on the carbon emissions, and it was an error in billing. It was a change in contractor, a change in supplier of gas, which meant that our schools, and only our schools, were wrongly attributed to have lower carbon emissions than they should have. And in 2024 is corrected. We expect 2025 and 2026 going forward to be more accurate. But the trajectory is a decrease overall, but there is a lot more work to be done, and this team is going to be focusing on the council estate with the property and land asset management board, and the fleet management is a difficult but achievable win as well. Oh, sorry. We're expecting to bring that back in late summer this year.
Thank you, Andy. Can I just pick up that particular point that I think Councillor Diamond was making about that report that came to Finance and Performance Committee? It strikes me, and I think this comes on a quarterly basis, that our committee isn't always cited beforehand in some of these releases that go to Finance and Performance Committee. I'm not always entirely clear whether your team is always cited on some of these things either, which does concern me. You've given a really excellent and quality explanation of a narrative, effectively, to tell the wider story about why that is the case. Could you just clarify whether your team is consulted with regards to that data that is released? Because obviously behind it needs to be a narrative, and I want to make sure that the story that we tell is the correct story. And there's real danger, I guess, with kind of our stakeholders across the city if we release information without giving that correct story or narrative. In fact, I'll just go to Will Stewart.
Thanks, Ben. I'll jump in here because I share some of your concerns, and this isn't a criticism of other colleagues. I think it's reflective of the way that we've reported on some of this, really important data historically. So, Finance and Performance Committee has a series of key performance indicators which they draw from, as you've mentioned, on a quarterly basis. what we need to do, and a piece of work that I am agreeing with the data team currently behind this, is to make it absolutely clear when that data is asked for, that we've got that narrative that you described, that we're able to frame the data in the right context, and importantly say what we are doing to address emissions, particularly in this case. So as Andy's rightly said, you know, our two biggest areas for improvement as an organisation, as a council, notwithstanding the work that we're doing across the city, but as a council, are around our fleet emissions and around our own non-domestic estate. So, as Andy's mentioned, we're standing up to, you know, transformational projects to really get into those key areas of emission, and we hope to make rapid progress on those over the next year or so. But unfortunately, you know, we've not been able to kind of counter some of the data with kind of evidence around what we're doing in terms of projects. So in answer to your question, I think we need to get much better at making sure that the data is requested and presented at Performance Board first comes through this committee, and first comes through in a really clear and open way, comes through our officer cohort before it's presented at that committee, so that we can make sure that members who are rightly scrutinising the data have all the evidence available to them to make the right comments and you know, keep the council on track. So it is a piece of work that we are looking at the moment. I've made sure that I've made contact with the relevant officers who deal with supporting that committee, and we will make sure we deliver improvements for the next time.
Thank you, Will. That's really appreciated. I guess the timescales that we're working to here are that this is every 3 months. So hopefully for the next 3-month reporting window, we'll be able to have the officer core that's properly cited on that performance data. And we'll also be able to provide that narrative to be able to explain the future work here. And also if there are any particular anomalies, like, for example, in the data that's been released at the last monitoring report that Andy's quite ably explained to us, is due to changes in gas suppliers and the lack of data and all sorts of other different things with regards to that. Thank you. I'll just go to Councillor Mersrow, and I think then I had Councillor Gamble-Pugh, Councillor Mersrow and Councillor Horner. Apologies. Councillor Mersrow.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you very much for these reports. Regarding Victoria's report, I want to take the opportunity to say especially thank you to the Sheffield College participants of the Youth Takeover Day. I found reading in the appendix their thoughts and feedback about how climate change has affected them was really, really powerful. There was so much insight in what they said, and there was also really useful suggestions based on their experiences of how extreme weather, lack of green space, lack of shade and shelter, as well as poor transport options, how that all really affected their lives and their well-being. And I also noted their comments, as you already highlighted, Victoria, that demonstrated that those people who were already experiencing disadvantage were most especially impacted by this. The young people's desire for more green public spaces is echoed by so many people across the city, especially in my own ward, where green spaces and open spaces are really in short supply especially. I also echo their wish for trees to be planted in grass verges, because this offers so many benefits, including shade. And I'd like for this suggestion to be progressed for much more tree planting in verges than is the case currently in the city. I also welcome their request for more nature in the curriculum, including field trips, and recognise how important this is to strengthen people's relationship with nature, including the current care of the environment. And I'd also really value our committee hearing more from the young people involved in the Built for Change project in the future, and hope there'll be opportunity to do this.
Thank you, Ruth. Can I just go to perhaps Councillor Gamble-Pugh and then come back for reflections on both of those things? I think Councillor Mersrow makes some really important supporting points. Councillor Gamble-Pugh.
Yeah, thank you. I've got some questions directed to different officers for different parts of the report. Shall I just, I've got some specifically for Victoria about the schools programme. Shall I just give those now?
Feel free to.
Okay. Thank you. Really good to have that report. Really appreciate it. I just wondered, in terms of the schools engagement work that you talked about. So in my professional life, I'm a mental health nurse specialising in child and adolescent mental health. I recently completed a research project on the emerging prevalence of climate-related mental health conditions, and I just wondered if any evidence pointed towards that emerged in the engagement work with the schools. Also, echoing what Councillor Mersrow just said about tree planting, so I was very struck by what you said about the effect of heat and lack of cover in terms of walking to school is having on our children and young people. What role is there for increasing urban tree canopy cover in that, and what are we able to do about that at the moment? And then finally, I think it's been a really good piece of work, and I wonder what scope is there to do more of this work, particularly with schools in my ward in Ecclesfield and Chapeltown S35 area.
Thank you, Councillor Mersrow. Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I'll pass on the thanks of the committee to the college very shortly. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, so it's the input from those young people was incredibly powerful, and kind of watching them grow over the course of the day was also amazing. In terms of the mental health, so there are a couple of quotes in that report about the impact of the extreme weather on young people's mental health. We haven't heard much coming through, particularly around kind of more kind of climate anxiety related issues, but I'm very conscious that is something that is there. We haven't spoken to a huge number of young people, and we've focused mainly on the effects of extreme weather rather than concern. Certainly there was a little bit that came out from the conversations that we had, but so again, particularly it's more kind of actually these are our exams that kind of change our life. So we need that adaptation to be there. So that was what was coming out mostly. In terms of future work, and say we'll very much be looking for funding. The journey to school is one of the areas that came out really quite strongly, and the Simca's action, or the Sheffield active travel plan. I attended a meeting about that recently, looking at potential opportunities in Darnall, which is one of the areas which the Sheffield Street Tree Partnership is particularly interested in increasing tree canopy. So yes, we're working kind of closely with colleagues to try and encourage as many, I guess, kind of creative and imaginative ways of using funding to support adaptation as possible, and also to look at potential opportunities for funding bids to work both with schools but also with local communities. So one of the things that came through us is it isn't just the experience that within schools that is impactful for young people and their learning, but also local communities. Several of the schools are interested in working on other projects with communities. When we asked for applications for this, the Department for Education are very interested as well at using schools as climate adaptation hubs. So that was another route we'll be looking to go down in the future potentially as well.
Thank you. So I got some questions on flooding as well. It's good to hear from your update, James. As it happened, I was on Linden Court, just at the edge of Ecclesfield Park last week doing a street surgery and spoke to residents there. They were very pleased that since the work on flood mitigation has been done, the impact for them is they've repeatedly had their houses flooded down there and all around the perimeter of the park, and that hasn't happened since the mitigation, which is positive. I wondered if you could just remind us what the cost of the flood mitigation works around Ecclesfield and Chapeltown to the Whitley and Blackburn Brooks has been in a ballpark, and then sort of set against that as a baseline. I just wonder, that seems to have done the trick in terms of mitigating current levels of rainwater runoff with the built environment as it is. If we then go forward in sort of 20 years' time, we've got the proposed developments under the local plan of around 1,000 houses, 2 schools, 3 industrial estates. What's the kind of scale comparatively of the investment in flood mitigation that we might need as something that people locally are really worried about? And then on a more micro level, I've been emailing with you and your team about a blocked flap valve that's designed to let excess water runoff into the Blackburn Brook on Cowley Lane in Chapeltown that's become silted up and blocked. An update on that would be good. But in general, I wonder, is there like a schedule of planned maintenance to kind of unblock those things? We have kind of grills and meshes over culverts and those kind of valves that do get, you know, they will need that maintenance. Is that programmed in, and where does that sit in terms of responsibility?
Okay, Councillor. Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head the full cost of the Exeter Park works because it's been done in stages. So if I can take that one away and get back, there was a prior piece of work. There's now a technical piece of work, and then there's an environmental enhancement piece of work which are sort of happening together. So I'll take that one away, and I'll feed that one back to committee. The question regarding new development. All new development needs to ensure that it doesn't increase any flood risk to others, doesn't increase runoff. We will be consulted on all major development, comes through the development officers in my team to ensure that we are ensuring no detriment to others, and we look to encourage reduction in runoff from new sites as well through, as I say, through installing SUDs on new schemes. So that should address those issues as each development comes up in turn to ensure that we're not seeing any detriment from new development. The specific Cowley Lane issue, yes, I'm aware of that. My colleague James Wilson's looking into that. I'm not exactly sure precisely where we got our wires crossed between us being told something by Amy and the evidence that you've subsequently presented. Something's gone a bit awry there. I'll ensure that our officers look into that. With respect to schedule of maintenance and inspection, that's a responsibility that sits with our Amy Streets Ahead contract. These are assets that are maintained as part of the highway network. So that's something I'd have to take away and feedback. So I'd have to speak to colleagues on that, but I can do that as well and request that. That's one of these things that sits under the... Are they still Waston Street scene? Is that the right name for that? That committee is looking in Amanda's direction for confirmation.
Environmental Services
Is that what they're
and
called?
Regulation. It's a snappy title.
Yes, sorry for being out of date on committee names, but the Amy Streets Ahead contract and the maintenance sits under that committee and sits with our highways maintenance colleagues, so we don't have a direct involvement in that, but I'll take that question away. We have a regular monthly flood and highway meeting, and I will ensure that that issue is taken to that officers meeting for you.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell-Pugh, did you want to come back? Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also mindful, and Councillor Merger, I did go to Councillor Campbell-Pugh, but were you happy that you didn't need any further reflections on your question? Yes, thank you. Councillor Campbell-Pugh, and then Councillor Horner as well. Apologies, Councillor Campbell-Pugh.
Thank you. Yes, on the business route map and the local area energy plan, I just wondered, is the business route map just focusing entirely on the important work of supporting businesses to introduce adaptations and mitigations to protect them as trading entities, or are there is there scope within that to look at where there are commercial opportunities for green businesses? Because we know that there is opportunity to sort of innovate and trailblaze, and there's money to be made, and there's a benefit for the economy in supporting green businesses in terms of climate opportunities. In fact, on the Pensions Authority, which I sit on, we're regularly told that there are insufficient opportunities within that sector of climate opportunities for us to adequately invest in order to decarbonise the investment portfolio. So I just wonder, does the support and incubation and scaling up of those green businesses come under that route map, or does that sit somewhere else?
Yes, there's elements of the green businesses and what they can do, and but the focus is on decarbonisation. And I saw an early draft of it, and that is reflected in the report. It's launched next week, I think next Thursday. So you'll be able to see for yourself and for colleagues the final report. But that work is primarily aimed at decarbonisation rather than business opportunity. But there is evidence of skills and new opportunities for business indicated in the document.
Thank you. I will just go to Councillor Horner.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few observations. Victoria, I share your point entirely about the bus shelters. The old-fashioned brick design bus shelters, which you can often see, particularly in the countryside, appear to have lasted forever. And the cheaper glass shelters, which actually aren't very good anyway, very often, particularly in heat, because if they're made of glass, I think it's a bit like a conservatory. It gets very hot. So I think it's perhaps time to reverse engineer with some of these, put some brick in. On the wider point, I mean, yeah, it's fantastic that finally we are now going back to bus franchising. But one of my concerns has been that it seems to me Simca is simply obsessed with taking over the bus network as it is and running it as it is, and doesn't appear to have any plan to look at potential future routes or what the usage of the buses are and so on, because I'm not sure that enough people have access, particularly since the bus cuts of a few years ago, have proper access to buses. On the point about trams, by the way, I'm pleased also that the blue route will be restored to 12 minutes again, I believe from the middle of April. However, I was speaking to a resident last night who said, I go to work every day, or try to go to work every day on the tram. Would Simca like to recognise that that includes my going to work in the school holidays and stop regarding the school holidays as the opportunity to shut the tram network to do various amounts of work? I mean, I accept they have to do that work, but they are causing problems to people who want to use trams more on a day-to-day basis. And yet, in his reply to me on the subject of the state of the concrete tram, the Mayor does point out that the tram loses money. Well, it'll continue to lose money if we actively discourage people from using it. So I'm keen that we get more usage that way, because getting people out of their cars is something that high-quality public transport has a key role in, and that's what we need. I mean, I welcome that we're getting electric buses, but as I say, we need a better bus network, and we need a reliable tram network, and we also need to protect people from the weather. When I go out of here today, I shall walk to the Cathedral tram stop. The Cathedral's tram stop has a little bus-type shelter, well set back from the edge of the platform. Masses of people use that tram stop and have to do that when it rains in the sunshine, where it's perfectly possible to put in a very big covering, it would seem to me, so that the large numbers of people who use it could actually be under cover when they're waiting for a tram. So that's my point to Victoria. The point about improvements to buildings, and particularly relevant to the point that Councillor Huggan was making earlier about those who would seek to scrap all this, I'm delighted in my ward that there are 2 roads now where the council is updating prefabricated contract houses. And the residents are getting houses that are going to have breeze block, insulation and brick. Now imagine what that will do for their fuel bills. So all these people who tell you that our work on climate change is an added burden, well, try telling that to those residents who've had to heat houses that are inadequate. And there are still loads of those across this city. So that's a key area where this council needs to invest. I'm delighted it's happening in my ward, and I wish that to happen right across the city, because that will benefit some of the lowest paid people, some of the poorest people in the city, in heating their houses. And let's make that point. There is a lie going around about this business of climate change costing people. There's a very clear example where it does not cost people. It has a real benefit to some of the poorest in this city, and we should shout that loudly.
Absolutely, and I guess there's also some positive news. You mentioned about refurbishment of bus and bus stops and tram shelters and stops as well. As I understand it, I think 2 days ago, Simca put out some information to say that in the next few years we're going to see, and they say, as well as new bus and tram shelters with an iconic design that reflects our ambition and sets a new benchmark for user-led design, innovation and beauty. So hopefully those people who are waiting for their bus and tram, and hopefully in the future it won't be such a big gap between one tram and bus into the next, will have a proper bus shelter or tram stop as well. Before I just go back on any final reflections on Councillor Horner's points or anyone else's points, do I see anyone else who wants to contribute or make a point about this particular item? I'll just go to Councillor Gamble-Pugh and then go back for final reflections, including on Councillor Horner's points about public transport. Apologies also, Councillor Shaw. Councillor Gamble-Pugh, are these general reflections or questions?
Two further questions.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. I've missed off. I got a question on the local energy plan. I think there was a reference in the presentation to the commercialisation phase of it, and when we think about commercial operations, we sometimes don't think about some of the organisations and the providers that are pioneering and trailblazing and doing the proof of concept work. So social enterprises, community organisations, cooperatives and mutuals. So there's a risk that if we push towards commercialisation, having done the pre-work and put in, volunteer time and grant and public money, then at the point of commercialisation, the big corporates come in and hoover up whatever money is to be made, rather than reinvesting it back in the sector. So, are we wise to that within that bit, the commercialisation phase? And then my final question was about the Solar for Schools programme. I just wondered whether any of the suitable schools were in the Chapeltown, Ecclesfield, S35 area. I know in particular, Mr. Walkden, Richard Walkden, who's the head of Ecclesfield Comp. He's very keen to engage. He was a bit frustrated that when we spoke to him, as far as he was aware, his school, which is one of the largest secondaries, isn't included. So it'd be good to get an update back to the local schools.
Yeah. So the commercialisation issue that has been. We've been speaking with the community energy in Sheffield for months, and certainly since I arrived, and we're very minded to create a package which is supported by that sector as well as the more mainstream energy companies that will prevail. So there's something in this for everyone, and there are appropriate packages of work that can be delivered by the community energy sector, and we're very minded. I've insisted on a line in the procurement which talks about packages being designed for the community energy sector in particular.
Sorry. Ecclesfield Primary School is included in this first phase, and we haven't been explicit with which schools are in or out until we get through that kind of design phase, because we are aware there will be some dropping out due to restructure once those surveys are undertaken and things like that. So we're being flexible by design so that when some drop out, we can bring in other schools that have already signed up for it.
Thank you for both of those responses. It's good to hear that Ecclesfield Primary is involved. Mr. Walkden is the head of Ecclesfield Comp. Can I give him an update?
Thank you, and we just got an offer to make sure that you're updated on that one, particularly about Ecclesfield Secondary School. Thank you very much, Councillor Campbell-Pugh. Councillor Shaw, and then we'll go back for some final reflections, including on some of the points that Councillor Horner made about public transport in general. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. It's hopefully a very quick question. So on the business decarbonisation route map, is there anything in it, or one of the things that needs to be considered is helping decarbonise how employees get to work, and making sure businesses support their employees, because whatever the council does or Simca does around like public transport and things, businesses need to do their bit by, for example, like ensuring that there's secure cycle parking or somewhere where people can get changed or shower and other things if they wanted to like cycle to work or run to work or anything like that, and also with these new proposed developments in various parts of the city and new business and industrial sites, it needs to make sure that there's an actual bus route or something serving those new locations. So is there anything in this new route map that kind of addresses those points and make sure that businesses will do their bit to support their employees? Thank you.
Yeah, I believe there are some elements of the of providing for the employee. I mean, of course, we all live lives where we get up in the morning, we have to travel to work, and then we exist. And there is a danger that all of the emphasis is placed on the building that they're in, and what measures can be taken to address that. So I'll go away and I'll find out exactly what is in the report for your information.
Thank you very much. And I think Councillor Horner just made some broader reflections on transport more broadly. Would it be possible just to have some final reflections on Caradog as a whole, and also anything on Councillor Horner's point? I appreciate we've also done a transport decarbonisation route map over the last few years as well, and that's been a particular significant piece of work that we've been pushing forward on as a committee. Andy, I'll just hand over for you for any final reflections.
So I would thank the committee for hearing the report and the breadth of coverage that we've got, and this only really is a relatively small amount of what my team are doing and indeed what is happening across the wider council. I think the ambition is very clear, and a lot of this work has got to continue, and I hear what you're saying about Build for Change. You're very excited about that project, and that programme is funded until April 27, and I think it's an invaluable piece of work, and it links up crucially different services and different committees around the council and across the city. James's work is going to become increasingly important as we face into a changing climate in Sheffield, and I think all the support he can get is welcomed. We're considering a wider adaptation strategy across the council, and that will link in with the green and blue space strategy, which is evolving at the moment as we speak. The work of the LEAP will come back to this committee in due course to report on its findings and its recommendations. And of course, we expect and hope for more good news from the climate investments and future raises that we will endeavour to make. Thank you, Chair.
And thank you very much, Andy, and thank you very much to Victoria, to James and to Matt for the presentations today. As a committee, we wanted to make sure that there was a spotlight that was placed on this work. We know that sometimes it takes quite some time to develop it, and it is a good opportunity to provide scrutiny, but also to provide a spotlight to it for the rest of the city. So thank you very much for bringing this to us today. Colleagues, the report that you have that we've been considering there is on 59, or page 59 of the agenda pack, and the recommendations are outlined on page 61 of the agenda pack. Can I see whether colleagues are all agreed with approving the recommendations there? If there are any dissent, could you please raise your hand? I'm seeing colleagues are nodding. There's no colleagues who are raising their hand. That was a very positive discussion, and we're all in agreement. So colleagues, we've therefore approved that particular item. Andy and team, thank you very much for presenting that report. Now, because that item took some considerable time and it was right to do so and the committee wanted to prioritise it, it does mean to say that we are in need of extending the guillotine a little bit. Can I ask colleagues whether we're content with extending the guillotine by half an hour? You can see that we are. I can also see that David is sat down, but I was going to suggest whether the committee was minded to have a small comfort break of perhaps 2 to 3 minutes, and then we can recommence. Councillor Diamond, was that why you were putting your hand up? It's like coming back to being a school teacher again, isn't it? I do that on Thursdays and Fridays, and yes, you can use the toilet, and there are no bizarre rules to stop you. On the committee just had a very brief pause, a little comfort break in our agenda. We've extended the guillotine by half an hour. Just for the awareness of members, we do have 3 items that we need to give careful attention and consideration to. So we do need to be mindful to keep our contributions as succinct as possible. And I know sometimes I also need to be mindful of that as well. David, I think we're going over to you in a second. This is item number 10. That's the Local and Neighbourhood Transport Complementary Programme and Road Safety Fund Programme for 2025-26 and 26 to 27. And it's a delivery update. The report that you and team and colleagues have put together is on page 85 of the agenda pack. David, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is David Whitley. I'm the Transport Programmes Manager, and as you rightly said, this report provides an update on delivery of the 25 to 27 Local and Neighbourhood Transport Complementary Programme, formerly known as the Local Transport Plan, which was approved by committee on the 26th of March 2025. It also covers the Road Safety Fund Programme and highlights opportunities as a result of securing additional funding for investment in transport projects, which is really good news. The recent focus of this additional funding has been around making it easier and safer to walk and cycle around the city, helping meet the decarbonisation aims of the How We Travel route map approved by this committee. We'll be carrying forward around about £10 million into 26-27 and then beyond that's previously been allocated via decisions made by this committee but has not yet been spent. The proposed changes within the programme include reinforcing the move towards developing road safety schemes prioritised through the Vision Zero approach, which you've mentioned a couple of times during the meeting already, a new allocation to enable changes to be made within the Kelham Neeps End parking scheme, meeting a commitment we made to the community when the scheme was introduced in November 2024. But it also highlights some known unknowns that highlight that we'll need to keep the programme under review with the likelihood of a need for further changes to come back through this committee for a further decision later on this year. The details of a small number of new schemes including in the main body of the report and highlighted in the appendices. Appendix B of the report includes more detail on delivery of schemes within the Road Safety Fund Programme specifically. I ask that you support the recommendations on page 87 of the meeting papers, noting that individual projects will still need to go through the Council's capital approval process managed via the Finance and Performance Committee. Any questions? I will stop there, Chair. Please just ask.
Thank you very much, David. And I love to hear about known unknowns as well. I think it's a legacy of Donald Rumsfeld many years ago, yeah. Okay, colleagues, any points of clarification, questions, and then matters for discussion? Councillor Huggan.
The Manchester Road, Selborne Road scheme, I'm looking forward to see what the plans are for that, because obviously it's been particularly tricky and there have been, people who have had opposing. We're not opposing the things that where there's some parts of the scheme where implications would have implications for other residents who want opposing things to happen, if you see what I mean. So I'm just looking forward to see how that pans out at the earliest opportunity. Thank you.
Councillor Huggan, can you just clarify what particular road that was again?
I think it's Selborne Road, wasn't it? Manchester
Selborne Road.
Manchester Road.
Thank you, Selborne Road, Manchester Road. Thank you so much. I think it was your microphone or perhaps my ears.
Did you want a response on that one specifically? So I'm more than happy to.
If you've got some plans in there, I don't want to take out the time of the committee with the details, but I see that it's in the scheme. There've been various ideas come out, but obviously this is one that's going to have to be carefully considered with relation to different residents having different ideas about what the scheme will achieve potentially.
So in terms of the detail of any future designs, that's certainly something that we'll provide, offline as well as particularly as a local councillor. But I think you just raised a really good point that in terms of an awful lot of the progress on schemes, or various effects of programmes on delivering schemes within the programme that we have, it comes from the back of public consultation engagement, which is really important. But it's quite common that we don't get that consensus. And it does take time and a number of iterations, which ultimately increases the cost of delivering our projects too, as well as delaying them. But it's a really important point that you make. That engagement's really key, but the reiterations do cost us in time and money. Again, in terms of the detail of that project, we'll make sure that you get the details offline.
Thank you for that assurance, David. I will go to Councillor Campbell-Pugh, and then I'll go to Councillor Shaw and Councillor Diamond. Councillor Campbell-Pugh.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good to see that there are plans for the development on outside Newlands Academy on Creswick Lane. It's just outside my ward, but it's a catchment school for a lot of people in my area, and it is absolutely horrendous there. It's really, really dangerous for the children and parents. It's a nightmare for the residents. Anybody driving around the area just can't get through. So it's very, very welcome. However, that site is the source of controversy and real concern in the community at the moment because it adjoins one of the large greenbelt sites that's been put forward as part of the local plan. So people are asking themselves, well, if we know how bad the problem is at the moment, how can we possibly manage the additional load on the network and the additional challenges in terms of road safety for the school children if those plans go ahead? And I just wondered if you could offer some reassurance and some context about where this scheme, where the need and demand for this scheme has come from, because some residents are, I think, incorrectly saying, oh, this is being done to pave the way for Townend Farm to be built over, and are worried that this will be, a once and only mitigation to balance out that kind of coming potential strain on the network. Thank you.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So no, it isn't. I think it's a simple answer to that question. We have as the chair mentioned earlier on in the meeting, we have a £3 million programme of developing crossings that are prioritised using pre-agreed process, and this scheme happened to come forward through that prioritisation process. So it's managing an existing need rather than a potential future need. In terms of the future, should anything change in terms of the greenbelt sites, or should any planning application come forward, as a council, we have a highways development control team which will look at the impact of any new development, and if there's then a requirement to make changes on the local highway network, to mitigate the effects of that impact, that will be dealt with through the planning process. So just to be really specific in terms of answering your question, this particular site has come through on the basis of managing the existing situation rather than any potential changes in the situation over the next few years. Obviously, subject to the relevant approvals that would require. Hopefully that provides some reassurance for you.
Thank you very much, David, for providing that reassurance. Councillor Shaw and then Councillor Diamond. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, David, for the report. I mean, it's really good to see a lot of the schemes in here, including a couple in my ward or adjacent. In particular, the Abbey Lane accessibility scheme, which is in Ecclesall ward, so just over the border from mine. And I mean, this is a scheme that's been going on for some time, and I know Councillor Masters has been really pushing this for a number of years, and I'd like to think it probably wouldn't be happening as fast as it would be if she hadn't been kept lobbying about it. It says construction's currently expected to start in summer 2026. Do you have any information on when construction will be finished on that? And then secondly, it's nice to see the kind of the Sheaf Valley kind of permanent works being implemented. So for as a former councillor Auckland described it, the beautification of all these temporary measures that we approved a couple of years ago. And it's nice to see that those will be going in and hopefully making Sheaf Valley route even more appealing for people to walk or cycle into the city centre. So just a comment really on that latter one. Thank you.
So it's really encouraging to hear about your positivity about the Sheaf Valley. In terms of Abbey Lane, again, it's another good example of good cooperation between ourselves and the Mayoral Combined Authority. So this is a scheme that the Mayoral Combined Authority are investing quite a lot of money into. I understand the frustrations in terms of the length of the process, but again, it's just worth reiterating that a big part of that is taking on board local community engagement. Early on in the scheme, which identified we need to make some quite significant changes to what was originally proposed. So we went back round through the initial feasibility design process, which again is something that from my perspective I do see as a positive, although I get the frustrations in terms of the length of time that might take. In terms of a construction end date, that's again something in terms of the detail that I will come back to you. In terms of that particular size and scale of scheme, I would anticipate that the build period could be up to about 4 months. But I will come back to you when I can make sure I speak to the team member who's the client for that scheme, who can then have a look at the detail of the programme rather than just my assumption. But I would estimate it to be up to about 4 months.
Thank you, David, and Councillor Diamond.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this report and all the work that's going on these schemes. It's ambitious to try and deliver everything between now and 2027, but I hope that we'll be able to do as much as possible. Also, thank you for providing additional information around the changes on the Kellam and Neepsend parking scheme. That was really helpful for me to pass on to colleagues. I'll probably just pick some of this offline because we haven't got much time, but I think it's even after being on the committee for like 2 years, it's quite confusing, all of the different funds and also the sort of categorisation of the different schemes. So most of them include crossings in the schemes. Even like the cycling one has a pedestrian crossing on Rockingham Street. So it's like a question about the accuracy on the pie chart, or would it be misleading? But in terms of specific questions, so we've got some of the local safety schemes on page 89 and 90. I was just wondering if they're progressing on schedule. I could name them if you like. And then page 93 is talking about some crossings that were the local and neighbourhood transport complementary plan schemes now being CRSTS, but my understanding is the funding is the same, so just confusing about that. And then on page 106, there's the Broadfield, Staveley Road, Glover Road highlighted in red in the sort of, is that, I was just wondering why that's highlighted red there.
No problem. I can certainly help. So I've made some notes. Apology if my notes, could be better. So if I forget anything, please tell me. So Broadfield Road, Staveley. The reason it's in red is because that's just highlighting that there's been a need for a reasonably significant increase in terms of that particular allocation. There's a little bit more text within the main body of the report. But I think one of the things to highlight was that we'd originally put in here a £100,000 allocation for some for some statutory undertakers plant that needed to be moved, but we were querying with the statutory undertaker as to whether we should pay it or they should pay it. Unfortunately, that's fallen with us. There has been some additional mitigation work done with a local business in the area too, but the main highway works have been done in that particular area for some time. So the reason that the projects are highlighted in red is that there's been a reasonably significant increase in terms of the funding moves to enable them to happen. The ones that are in blue are acknowledging that a lot of the papers are printed in black and white. It's the old snooker quote, isn't it? For those looking in black and white, the yellow's behind the brown. The ones in blue are new entries within the programme. You mentioned about Rockingham Street. I'll hold my hand up to that one. Yes, that's just simply my error in terms of putting it under the wrong block. It was predominantly a scheme that was around improving the crossing facilities at the West Street Rockingham Street junction. So that should really be sat under accessibility in terms of the LANTCP contribution. The majority of the funding for that scheme, around about 900,000, actually came from a different source. You're asking about projects, moving between LANTCP and CRSTS. You're absolutely right that fundamentally the money comes from the same source. So the LANTCP is a subset of CRSTS. However, the approval routes through the mayoral combined authorities business case process is really quite different. And I think what we're saying in this particular report here is that one of the projects that we had originally planned to progress through LANTCP in order to help manage some of the pressures within the programme or changing requirements in the programme will now be delivered through the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement. So we'll actually continue to develop that particular project, which was due to be on site in 27-28 anyway, so in the next 5-year funding round. So we'll continue to develop it using CRSTS revenue, but it will be delivered as part of a future programme, rather than this particular programme. Does that help, Councillor Diamond?
Apologies, just the page 89, 90. So we got the Crooks Valley Road, Harcourt Road, Oxford Street on site, completed by end of April. Is that on track?
I would have to check the detail.
Common Road.
Oh, sorry, I'd have to check the detail and come back to you. Right, yeah, I'm fully aware that we've carried on the site and we've had some really positive public feedback from the fact that the zebra crossing has now become a signal control crossing, and the level of compliance, the feedback in terms of the level of compliance of people stopping has been much higher. So it's a real positive. But in terms of the end date, is that something I can come back to you outside of this meeting?
Thank you very much, David, and thank you, colleagues. Anyone else who wishes to make a contribution? Councillor Mizra.
Thank you. Just a quick question about the signing and lining for the Kelham scheme. I've seen feedback from the Neighbourhood Association there, Kinker, but not aware of anything from anyone else. Just wondering if you can clarify what the desired changes that you referenced are, in case they're different from those proposed by Kinker. Again, I'm happy to do this offline rather than in the meeting, if that's helpful.
So I can do it really, really quickly, and then we can go into a little bit more detail offline. So there are a number of items that came up from the community when the scheme was initially in. So things like, reducing, the number of, parking spaces by 1 or possibly 2 on Russell Street to make it easier to get in and out of the car park, for example. But it also covers the displacement effect of the scheme in other areas. So we've had a number of businesses, a small number of businesses in touch with us on Rutland Road and the side roads off Rutland Road that are asking for changes to the restrictions in their area because people have moved to park on and in and around their area to help manage some of the issues that they've now got. So one of the businesses is saying, please could we have an extra length of double yellow lines as a result to mitigate the effect, to ease loading and unloading to our property. There's a number of situations like that. They're not huge, but enough in terms of volume. But we hope to be able to make a really positive effect. For the operation of those businesses going forward. There's certainly enough changes that we think are necessary that that merits us putting a capital allocation in to make to make the project happen. What I can't sit here and say at this stage is whether we'll spend all of the 50,000 or whether the 50,000 allocated is enough. If there is a requirement to come back and change that slightly once we've done a little bit more work in terms of what the changes, the detail of the changes might look like, we'll clearly come back to committee then.
Thank you, David. And I think Councillor Mersrow makes a really important point. I think we should also thank you for your really diligent work when it comes to the Kelham and Neepsend and parking scheme there, and your work with businesses in order to tackle any issues that they might well be facing as a result of that. We know that was a really important scheme, not least because we know that it's a significant area of housing growth and regeneration for the city, both in line with the local plan, but also more broadly about what we're doing to bring more residents into and around the city centre as we regenerate Sheffield and make it a place that people can stay here and bring up their family if they wish. Colleagues, I don't see anyone else who is indicating to speak, so therefore I'm going to ask whether we are content with the approvals for this particular item. It's on page 87 of your agenda pack. Are we agreed with the recommendations that are outlined there on page 87? I'm seeing that colleagues are nodding. There's no one raising their hand to dissent, so therefore we have passed item 10, which is the Local and Neighbourhood Transport Complementary Programme Road Safety Fund for 25, 26 and 26 to 27 delivery update. David, thank you very much for pulling this together. It's really appreciated. Our next item is item number 11, which is a report of objections received to the speed limit order for the Beaverhill and Arbourthorne 20-mile-an-hour schemes. Lisa is going to be running us through that, but as I understand it, I think in the room also is Alex Margrave, who is going to be taking over this piece of work in the future. So welcome very much to Alex, and thank you very much, Alex, as well, for coming into our pre-meetings as well. Lisa, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Lisa Blakemore. I'm a Principal Transport Planner working for David for the projects team. So the committee is familiar with the 20-mile-an-hour programme, and these are the latest batch from that, the Arbourthorne and Beaverhill areas. The programme contributes to our Vision Zero commitment. Also, the Council's plan to allow great neighbourhoods and a city on the move, allowing people to make a really good judgment about how they want to travel around the city, whether they want to change modes, and we just want to create the safe conditions to allow people to make that judgment. The first scheme is the Beaverhill scheme, which is in the Woodhouse area if people are not familiar with it. It's a location that we get a lot of queries from members of the public because there's a school within the area, and also one of the roads is a bit of a rat run for people trying to avoid Retford Road during busy times. So we do get a lot of requests for this to be made 20, so it's nice to finally get around to doing that. We've just received the one objection. I don't know if members have read the objection in full, but a very flavoursome objection. But I think the point is that, it's a pointless scheme. Obviously, we've got a commitment to installing 20 mile an hour on all suitable residential roads, so that was the officer response to that. We've also had 8 letters of support for the scheme. We've also included Pickford Crescent, which is a fairly new estate. I think it was missed out of one of the previous 20 schemes, so we've just captured it in this scheme. It's not location-wise next to it, but now we're getting further into the programme. We are finding these little bit of areas that might have been missed from previous schemes, and to complete the jigsaw, we're trying to gather as many of those roads in as possible. Arbourthorne, I know, is in the Chair's area, Park and Arbourthorne. We've received 69 letters of support from this area with just 3 objections. One objection supported the scheme in principle, but objected to Guildford Avenue being in the scheme. Our response to that is that we saw no reason to exclude the road because it met all the necessary criteria for inclusion. And the other 2 was just talking about they would like to see extra measures. The 20 doesn't go far enough. They'd like to see speed humps. So the recommendation, in line with our policy, is to approve the schemes and get them built. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Lisa, can I just quickly ask you a question? Obviously, it's great to hear, isn't it, that we had, at least in my ward, the scheme that's going in there, 69 members of the public who got in touch to support things, only 3 objections. Just give us a quick update as to when we're likely to see this on the ground.
So this one's slightly more complex in terms of its design because of its integration with the tram. So a lot of the roads just come off the tram network, so it needs slightly more design than some of the other schemes. It's currently in that process, so I'm expecting early summer, all goes well, for it to be implemented if it's agreed today.
Thank you very much, Lisa. It's really appreciated. And I guess it's probably important to say, I know we've picked up these conversations outside this meeting, but the list of zones right across the city, and I think we're progressing with them, we're well over 50% now, aren't we, of the whole city covered, was decided many, many years ago, probably before you were in post, certainly before I was a councillor, and they've got strange names to them, haven't they? So, for example, for avoidance of doubt, I guess we call the one in my ward the Arborthorne scheme, but actually it's the Norfolk Park scheme, isn't it? It includes kind of bits of Park and Arborthorne that are Norfolk Park and bits of Manor Castle that are also Norfolk Park as well. So for the avoidance of doubt, this is a legacy from many years ago, isn't it, in terms of the naming conventions that we've got?
Yeah, absolutely, and it gives me no end of trouble, especially when people are really passionate about the area they live in. You know, one of my colleagues, we called one of the schemes Loxley, and it's never been anywhere near Loxley. It's Walkley, really. But when you've got, 100 and odd schemes coming up with, innovative names, they've all got unique reference numbers too, but if we use them, they wouldn't really mean anything to people. So we do try to explain that they are just an identifier rather than trying to describe the actual locality of the area. It's just each one has to have its own unique name, and I do try and tell people that, but it does get a little bit controversial when people are very, rightly happy about the name of the area they live in and we're calling it something else. Absolutely. But it is a legacy thing from 2012 when the programme first started.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I'll just go to Councillor Diamond, I think then Councillor Mercer and Councillor Shaw.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Thanks Lisa for the report again. Really pleased to see these coming forward. On the Beaver Hill scheme, I do think it's a shame that we couldn't have included Beaver Hill Road or parts of Beaver Hill Road, but I understand at this point why they're not included, but hopefully the refresh of the 20-mile-an-hour policy might address some of those. It does have a college on it and is largely residential, isn't it? And on the Arborthorns, I was going to comment as well on the strange naming, similar to the one we had on the Cemetery Road scheme that didn't include Cemetery Road. And so I think a lot of it is in Manor Castle, which for some reason we've discussed quite a lot in this meeting. Hopefully the inclusion of Castlecroft will make that area safer, with something that we discussed earlier on. There's some other roads again in the Arborthorne or Park Hill scheme that aren't included, but on this criteria. So, City Road, Duke Street, Shrewsbury Road, Talbot Street, Granville Road, obviously that's tram, but yeah, I'm also really pleased about the discussions that we were having yesterday, which might accelerate the rollout of 20-mile-an-hour schemes across areas of the city, which will lessen the workload and benefit people really quickly.
Thank you, Councillor Diamond. And I guess for people who are following at home, we alluded to it, didn't we, at the start of the meeting, that we were in discussions in our knowledge briefings between councillors and officers to develop our approach to how we strengthen our approach to 20-mile-an-hour schemes right across our city, and perhaps take a slightly different approach to this to expedite things. Lisa?
Hopefully the namings will not be an issue if we do, change our approach to how we deliver. So maybe we can sort that out with that new policy. I agree with you about Beaver Hill, and as you quite rightly mentioned, it's not possible to include it with this existing policy. What we do normally do is if a school's entrance is on an A or B road, we do install a part-time school 20-mile-an-hour limit on that road. I think the reason we've not with this one is because the entrance is actually on Handsworth Grange, which is in the zone itself. But if you did want us to kind of take away and look whether there's a possibility of doing that on Beaver Hill, whether we can install the part-time 20, it is a busy road. you know, it's not very slow. It's something that we can definitely look at doing, but that is the reason we didn't in the first instance, because the actual entrance is on Handsworth Grange, which is covered. But if it's something you'd like us to take a look at, we certainly can.
Yeah, I think I'd welcome that, yeah.
Thank you. I think I saw Councillor Mersrow indicate, then Councillor Shaw, and then Councillor Campbell-Pugh. Councillor Mersrow.
Thank you. Thanks very much for the report. Just wanted to highlight there's so much evidence in there from the so-called objections reports that these zones are really, really popular, and people who live there really wanting them to go forward and often writing to ask if they can be extended, and they significantly outnumber the objections frequently as well. Also, I really want to accelerate and extend the rollout of these schemes across the city. Thank you very much for all your work on these.
Thank you for that really helpful comment, Councillor Mersrow. Councillor Shaw, and then I'll go to Councillor Campbell-Pugh, and then we'll go back for final reflections. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Lisa, for the report. I mean, Councillor Mersrow already touched upon what I was going to say about the sheer volume of comments in support versus objections. You know, was it 8 to 1 and 69 to 3? I mean, on the latter one, is there anything like different about the scheme or the consultations that that kind of invited so many comments in support? Was there like a petition or anything, or was it all individual responses? And then secondly, it's more of a comment, of course, to that. Yeah, it would be nice if we could get to the stage when these schemes go to relevant LACs, because we are, we do run short of time in these meetings as we are today. Thank you, Chair.
We'll just go to Lisa. I think perhaps the question of kind of our governance probably needs to be decided by councillors in consultation with officers, and something for governance committee that we need to make the point to. I guess No, I completely agree with you. I guess I would probably caution, if we want a speedy process and a speedy rollout process, then perhaps delegating all of the decision making to LACs might lead to increased officer workload, increased expense, and also it might slow us down a little bit. But I do appreciate what you're saying about the need for LACs to be consulted, to be part of the process, much more than they probably are at the moment. And I know there's perhaps diversity of viewpoint when it comes to these things. I think it's a point that Councillor Campbell-Pugh makes, and he's in my party and certainly takes a strong view on this too. Lisa.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. No, in terms of the consultation, we do the exact same in every area. Arbourthorne is slightly bigger than the Beaver Hill area, so that might be why we've had more responses, but no, 69 separate emails. I do know that from my work in the Park Hill parking scheme that was mentioned earlier, we'll not mention that again, people did really want a speed limit in that area. They were really, banging the drum for it. So I imagine that they've took the opportunity that when it's come to them, yes, please give it us, and they're probably just really happy that we've finally come through with that, because it was something that came out of that consultation that they had a lot of road safety issues in the area. So I think they just thought, thank you, we'll take that.
Thank you, Lisa, and Councillor Campbell-Pugh.
It's a reflection, not a question.
Please feel free to make your reflection.
Can you guess what it is?
I can guess what it is. It'll be the same contribution we've had at previous meetings, but at least you're tenacious in making these points.
Yeah, so again, it's another one that I've made at every meeting of this committee for the past 4 years that I've had the privilege of sitting on it, which is that we very much value these schemes to improve road safety and get the balance right for people across the city. And that is within our remit, I believe, of us as a transport and climate policy committee. However, we have other structures and bodies and decision making within the council's officer core and within the governance structure to look at and be consulted on the detail of the implementation of the scheme. So while we don't want to slow things down, and we could be looking at offering out to LACs or ward councillors delegated decision making within timeframes that we set as being strategically important, so we can work within the resources that we have. I think it is really important that we place decision making in the communities that are best positioned to comment on the detail, and then in turn that would then free up our time as a policy committee to go back to the point I made previously, which is to enable us to have more time to look at the strategic issues of citywide and global importance, such as the climate crisis. Thank you.
It's a point that is very well made and has been made in countless meetings now and has been developed, so thank you very much for making it. Councillor Diamond.
Yeah, just really quick one. I would really encourage members that weren't able to watch it come yesterday to watch back on the knowledge briefing we had yesterday, because it addresses some of the points that have been, questions that have been raised today.
No, I completely agree. I think, notwithstanding the points that you've made there, Councillor Diamond, I think there is still a thread of work there in kind of those cross-party contributions about kind of delegated authority and where that delegated authority should sit. I know that Governance Committee are working on that. I know that transport officers are working on that. I think we've been party to various documents over the time, over the past few months when it comes to this. But if we can make progress on that, I think it would be very much appreciated by this committee, wouldn't it? Colleagues, I don't see anyone else who is making any indication to speak on this particular item, so let's just go to the recommendations. That is on page 113 of your agenda pack. Colleagues, can I ask whether we're all agreed? I think we are. Any dissent? I don't see any dissent, so therefore that item, the item number 11 on the Beaver Hill and Arbourthorne 20-mile-an-hour scheme has been approved. Thank you, Lisa, for bringing that. Really appreciate it. I'm going to ask colleagues whether we can extend the guillotine by a further half an hour. That may well not be necessary. I appreciate that some members may need to leave, and I can see that Councillor Wright is indicating that he needs to leave. Thank you, Councillor Wright. Catherine, apologies that you've waited so long to present your item. It's really important and represents a significant investment and change in our city. So thank you so much, and I hope you were able to get some work done whilst you were watching the other items. So this is item number 12, which is an update on the heat network zoning and Sheffield's advanced zoning programme. It's page 159 of the agenda pack, and Catherine Warrington is going to present it to us today. Catherine, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, so I'm Catherine Warrington. I'm the Heat Network Programme Lead within City Futures. Andy referred to me earlier and said that I was bringing a separate paper outside of the broader city sustainability update. So I last came to this committee back in April last year, again for another bit of an update in terms of the work we're doing around preparing for heat network zoning and specifically on the advanced zoning programme. And that sought approval at that point to proceed to the procurement of a development partner. So I've come along this morning just to give a further update and just to seek a couple of delegated decisions. So I think probably of sort of the relevance is since I last came to you, back in January this year, the government launched its response to the consultation plan around heat network zoning. That was launched alongside the Warm Homes Plan, which set another commitment that the government is wanting to achieve 20% of heat from heat networks by 2050, with an interim target of 7% by 2035. And it's kind of reconfirmed financial commitment as well to heat networks, with budget for sort of capital investment up until 2030. So I think that's, quite a good sort of solid basis that, there's sort of further support coming for heat network developments across England. That consultation response confirmed the government's minded to position in terms of what buildings would be required to connect within a designated heat network zone, which I think when I came to this committee last April, it's not really changed much from there. So it would basically be any new buildings that are coming through the planning system once the zone's been designated, any pre-existing buildings, domestic or non-domestic, that are already communally heated. So, for example, some of our council housing stock that's on communal boilers, and any kind of large existing non-domestic estate that's consumes over a certain amount of heat a year, and that's 100 megawatt hours a year, but that also has a compatible heat system, so not heat systems that are fully kind of electric heated, but are on a wet heating system. So now that consultation response has been made public, government are now sort of working through their final statutory instrument, which when they released the consultation response earlier this year, they were suggesting would probably be spring this year, but I was on a call earlier this week with the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, and they're now saying they probably expect that to be laid in Parliament in the autumn time. So that's kind of a bit of an update in terms of like what's happening nationally in terms of the formation of the legislation. Department for Energy did also a couple of weeks ago release their draft version of the statutory instrument, which they've shared with sort of industry bodies, and they're looking for feedback on that by next week. So we're just currently reviewing that ourselves as well to see if it is forming the way that we perhaps intended it is going to. So since early 2022, Sheffield has been participating in a couple of Department for Energy programmes to help the government kind of form its policy, but also to help select local authorities kind of gear up for heat network zoning. And specifically, we've been part of the advanced zoning programme since 2023. And ultimately, that's really aiming to kind of inform the government policy as that's forming, but also to build capacity in terms of knowledge and awareness and skills within local authorities, so that once zoning regulations are in place, there's kind of capacity in local areas, but also to gear the market up ready for zoning coming through and the increase in heat network developments that is expected across England. As I said, so we came to this committee last April. We had approval at that point to proceed to procurement, which at that time we were aiming to do throughout last year. There were delays to that, mainly due to delays in the advisors working with us that are recruited directly or procured directly through the Department for Energy. There was delays in their contracts being signed off. So we didn't end up working with them until sort of the back end of summer last year. So we're now gearing up for procurement again, and we've held a market engagement day earlier this month, and we had about 60 individuals attend that, which is really positive. And we're looking to launch our procurement a week tomorrow. So that's really exciting, with a view that we go to contract award in August. So when I gave an update last year, we talked about the different kind of routes to market that Department for Energy has established for the advanced zoning programme cities. And the importance of these route to markets for the cities that are involved in the advanced zoning programme is that they have been developed in a way that align with the future statutory instrument. So that work that we're doing now as part of the AZP will align to those regulations in future, which means that we've procured a development partner in a way that's compliant with those regulations, and that will mean that we're able to award consents to that developer that will come through having a zone designated in an area. So the route to market we opted for, last time we gave an update, we were looking at two routes to market, one being the development agreement only route, and the other being the development agreement with Golden Share. Once our legal advisors and commercial advisors were onboarded over the summer, we held a sort of workshop internally with council officers and talked through what our main objectives were of heat network zoning and development within the city, and opted for the development agreement only approach. So under that approach, we will be procuring a development partner who will undertake development services for that heat network opportunity. So that will basically be the design, the commercialisation, and securing the finance to develop and build out that heat network. Under that development agreement, they'll have a 2-year period at which to undertake those services, and at the end of which they'll need to come back to us at what's called an approvals gateway and demonstrate that they've met our what's called mandatory requirements, so our key objectives that we're looking to get out of that development. Throughout that whole 2-year process, there is a steering group of which there will be council representatives on that. So it's not like they just come to us in 2 years' time at the approval gateway stage and, it's new to us. We'll be working with them, through that whole commercialisation period. At that approvals gateway stage, should it be approved, if they've met all the mandatory requirements, then that development agreement contract ends, and then they'll be free to go ahead and develop that heat network as they've set out. It's then envisaged through the statutory instrument that once zoning regulations are in place, and in theory we've got a zone designated within Sheffield, that development partner, because of following that procured process that's been set by the government, that we will be able to, as I said, give the consents to those to operate as the zone developer in that designated zone. So although our contract sort of obligations with that development partner will have fallen away at that point, through the statutory instrument, some of the new roles that are going to be established will help provide that ongoing oversight and governance of how the zone will be operated going forward, which I will talk about in a moment's time. So yes, that's kind of where we are really with the procurement. And as I say, we're launching our procurement next Thursday. So it's heads down at the moment in terms of just finalising the ITT documentation and working with advisors to finish that off. And the delegated decisions that we're requesting this morning is really around that procurement route. So one, it's to have delegated authority to director to award that contract following that procurement process, and also at the approvals gateway stage as well, to help sort of expedite that process. So through the zoning regulations, there's going to be two new statutory functions that are established, one of which is called the Heat Network Zoning Authority, which is essentially going to be the Department for Energy. And then as we understand it, what was detailed in the Warm Homes Plan back in January is that there will be a new agency established called the Warm Homes Agency. And it sounds like that zoning authority will in time become part of that warm homes agency. And essentially they'll have overall responsibility for the coordination of heat network zoning across England. The other statutory function is called zone coordination bodies, and this is very much around the coordination of heat network zones in the local area. And they basically have ultimate responsibility for the whole life cycle of the development and operation of that zone. So that will basically be things like local data collection and refinement, working with partners across an area, running public consultations, what would be a statutory consultation before a zone can be designated. They would have responsibility for developing what's called a zone market prospectus, which we have pretty much ready to go as part of our procurement process next week. So that basically just sets out the opportunities that there are for a developer to develop and deliver a heat network zone opportunity within an area, and basically having that responsibility for identifying and working with that development partner. The consultation response that Department for Energy released at this, in January sort of set out their minded to position of how they see the zone coordination body function working, and they refer to that as a two-tier model. So where you've got a zone that falls within an area where you've got a strategic authority, they see that strategic authority as having ultimate kind of the governance, but then with support from the local authorities underneath it. So as part of the advanced zoning programme that we're part of, we're receiving some additional resource and support from Department for Energy in working with South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority and with the other local authorities across the South Yorkshire region to start working through how that zone coordination body could work. So the first step of that is being the local authorities undertaking like a bit of a self-assessment in terms of where there's capability, capacity and appetite to take on some of those functions that the zone coordination body will be fulfilling going forward. That's at very early stages, so that work is just starting. So there will be sort of further conversations with yourselves and with sort of your colleagues across the South Yorkshire region as that work progresses and when decisions on that operating model need to be made. So yeah, and I think that's it from me. Thank you for my update.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Colleagues, any particular questions or comments? I'll go through Councillor Horner first. Councillor Horner.
Just a very quick comment. I mean, after all what I said earlier in our previous presentations, this is really important because this is about secure energy for people. And also the key word in there is low cost, because as I keep saying, there's a great lie going around that all of these things are going to put people's energy bills up, when in fact what's putting energy bills up is the best mate of the people who are spreading that load of old cobblers. The lunatic currently inhabiting the White House. Loads of people across this city have now got real concerns about what their future energy bills are going to be. we need to move to sustainable, low-cost energy systems as quickly as possible, because it's not those who can afford to jet off to Mario-Largo in the middle of that crisis who will be affected by it. It will indeed be many of the people who have been fed this load of old rubbish, that sustainable energy, that renewable energy is more expensive. It is not.
Thank you, Councillor Horner. I'll also just go to Councillor Diamond as well.
Thanks, Catherine, and thank you for the report and all the work that's been going on behind the scenes into this, and thank you for all the briefings that we've had and opportunities to ask questions. I fully support this work. I mean, it's really important that if we are generating this heat, that we are using it as well, noting that actually there was a report recently that's saying that burning waste is now the most polluting form of energy in the UK since we've phased out coal. So we should definitely make sure we're using the heat generated from that. I was just wondering, on the development partner, is there any sort of requirement that we have to, or that the heat needs to be a certain output from the incinerator, and could there be any clauses that present a financial risk? Noting that when we're going to move towards food waste collection, we had to not do that because Veolia threatened to charge the council a huge annual premium for diverting the food waste. So I was just wondering if there's anything that we need to be wary of in this when we're procuring the development part.
Thank you. Someone to come in there.
That's absolutely fine, Catherine. And if we just have some reflections, I think, on what Councillor Diamond was saying there, but also I think some of the wider points that Councillor Horner was making.
So I'll reflect on the points that you were making first, and I'll go in order. So obviously completely agree. So I think one of the things I probably omitted from saying at the start was ultimately this policy and these regulations are all about the lowest cost, low carbon route to decarbonisation. So that is the absolute kind of golden thread running through this policy. That's low carbon compared to a air source heat pump kind of comparison. I think the beauty of heat networks is that they are technology agnostic. So really, ultimately, once you've got the infrastructure, those pipes in the ground, the heat source can come from anywhere. So I think, to drive those costs even further down is about sort of looking at those waste heat sources, which I'll probably pick up on a little bit in my response to Councillor Diamond. It's about business opportunities as well. So under the regulations, any owners of waste heat source, whether that's data centres, whether it's industrial waste heat, they will be encouraged to sell any sort of surplus heat they've got to the developer. Where negotiations aren't reached, as I understand it from reading the consultation response, there will be powers within the statutory instrument to require those sources to connect. So again, that's just kind of really helping sort of really drive that, as you say, that resilient local heat source. So yeah, totally agree with that. Thank you. In terms of then the heat sources, so I think with regard to what we're going out to market for, we've identified what's referred to as our AZP opportunity area, which is very much based on data in terms of data that's coming down through the emerging, so it's not finalised yet, it's still in development, national zoning model, which is very much looking to address the low carbon, low heat solution. But we've also trying to kind of forward plan a little bit as well. So we've also at the local level included sites that are emerging and coming through the local plan and through regeneration and development ambitions through work that we're doing with Simca around like the Don Valley Growth Corridor. And then also we've just used a little bit of local knowledge to expand that out a little bit to include some additional buildings which we actually think probably may be required to connect once the regulations come into effect. It will then be for that development partner to, they have really the freedom within that area to develop an initial part of a project that they think is the most viable. It's also taken into account the fact that we do have 2 existing heat network operators within the city, as you say, and obviously with regard to your comments around sort of the energy recovery facility and the Veolia network. So through the development of the programme and what we're going out to market for, obviously we have had engagement with the incumbent network operators, and both of those have drafted alongside ourselves with the advisors sort of heads of terms, so that should neither of them be successful, assuming that they may bid, but should they not be successful, they have indicated to the market that actually they'd be prepared to sell some of their surplus heat to a development partner that may not be one of those incumbents. So whilst we think that yes, probably the main heat source is going to be either one of those existing heat sources, that's not necessarily guaranteed. You know, a development partner could come in and come up with a new solution. And again, I think that's the beauty of heat networks, that they are, you know, the heat source can come from anywhere. But yes, ultimately our modelling has been based on the heat coming from those. Within the heat network zoning regulations, there are going to be carbon emission limits that have to be met. So basically heat network zoning consents couldn't be given to an existing heat network operator or a zone developer in future if they don't meet those carbon emission limits, which I think from memory is 0.83 grams of CO2 per unit of energy, but I can come back to you on that. And then they're going to be reviewed every 5 years, as I understand it from the consultation response, and I think reviewed in line with like the carbon budgets, essentially. I think is how that's going to work. So ultimately, and that I guess will be the role of the zoning coordination body, that should the zone developer not be meeting those carbon emission limits, they'll get their consents revoked ultimately. So, thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. And Catherine, if you don't mind, I think you set in context how what we were developing sits alongside two established heat networks, that being the one that the council owns, that Veolia operates, E.ON's network as well in the Don Valley. I guess colleagues might be aware, but the front page of the Star today is a reflection, I guess, on E.ON's planning permission and the Don Valley, and the way that they've framed it is incredibly negative, and I would say quite regressive, really. They've said 5 years of chaos on roads. That's certainly not how I would look at decarbonisation of our heat network and lowering energy bills for people right across the city. But wonder if you could just say in context a little bit more as to why E.ON's work, particularly down in Don Valley, is really helpful for what we're seeking to do here, and what that will practically mean for people in the city.
Thanks, Chair. So I guess from a sort of a practical point of view, E.ON sort of planned expansion, for which they literally, I think just in the last week, got their planning consent for, I suppose offers up, obviously it's expanding their network, it offers up more opportunity, I suppose, to bridge that gap a little bit between where the two networks lie. I mean, obviously a big part of the zoning regulations agenda is to have like zonal scale opportunities. Nothing's off the table in terms of in time, potentially, especially in terms of resilience, you know, networks being connected. So again, I think these are all conversations that would come out during the development period with our appointed development partner as well, when you know, we're working through as part of the steering group with them in terms of what their proposals are and what they're looking at. Their planned expansion has been taken into account in terms of when our technical consultants have been looking at energy centre locations, for example. So if the development partner was to be looking to use surplus heat from the E.ON network, you know, where those connection points could be for a new network from their planned expansion. So I suppose it's just offering up those opportunities in terms of further growing heat network opportunities and getting more customers connected. I think in terms of, you know, I think, yeah, it's probably, yeah, difficult. You know, obviously that's their privately owned and operated network that obviously, you know, we've acted as planning authority on. They've obviously been very proactive in doing that. You know, probably with the mind that zoning regulations are coming as well. I know they've been proactive in terms of looking at sort of like the skills and the jobs opportunities as well, and obviously that forms a big part of their planning application as well in terms of those social value metrics. So.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Any other contributions from colleagues? I I think one of the things that we often don't bring out in debates when it comes to our discussions about energy and decarbonisation of energy, we often talk about kind of the importance of the environment, we talk about how it will help people's emissions in the city, talk about energy bills, but we often don't talk about energy security, do we? We know that there's global instability around the world, particularly at the moment in the Gulf and in the Middle East. We know that we saw spikes in energy prices around the initial outbreak of the war in Ukraine as well. And we know that for people, for residents in our city, that can really be acutely felt on their energy bills. And we as a council have got a duty to make sure that we assist people in making sure that their energy is not only decarbonised, but also is as cheap as possible. And that work that Catherine and the team are doing at the moment when it comes to this particular piece of work with the Advanced Zoning Programme is so crucial in doing all of those things. Colleagues, do we have anyone else who wishes to make a contribution about this particular item? I don't think so. So therefore we'll go to the recommendations for approval, which are on page 161 of your agenda pack. Are we all agreed? Seeing that colleagues are nodding, there's no abstentions. And certainly no one dissenting by putting their hands up, so therefore that has been carried. Catherine, thank you very much for bringing this item to us today. It's really appreciated, and thank you for the work that you do on our behalf. Colleagues, that does draw to an end our meeting today. It's the last meeting of our municipal year, so thank you very much for your participation and your work over this year. This is a three-party, cross-party administration, and I think our work and the spirit with which we've conducted it over the past year or so has reflected that. So thank you.